Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very important program. My name is Jim Stowe. I'm the Director of the Office of Human Rights in Montgomery County, Maryland. We are so glad you have joined us today for what we hope will be a great opportunity, not only to learn, but to equip yourself with a lot of information, and we're going to call them takeaways that you can carry back to your agencies and organizations, wherever you may be. April is Fair Housing Month. And we are excited about that because it calls the nation to focus in on the importance of the most basic need that we all have, and that is of shelter. You may know then that on April the 11th of 1968, the Fair Housing Law was finally passed after a number of attempts back and forth, and unfortunately with the death of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., did it begin to give some renewed momentum and move toward passage by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. And so we are grateful that we're at this point that we can recognize and begin to pay particular focus to these events that deal with how we can make housing accessible and affordable for every person seeking that particular opportunity for housing. And so that's our goal and objective here in Montgomery County. And so I'm pleased that our Human Rights Commission has been engaged in a series of discussions. They've been called Fair Housing Summits. This is the third of those summits to look at how we got here historically, as well as those things that tend to be the way we sort of do business. And then this issue of how, when we finally get equipped with the knowledge of how to get housing and how to figure out how to unravel this thing called discrimination in housing, how do folks actually get some place to live? How does that happen? And so we're here today to kind of talk about that topic and to look at this issue of headwinds that tend to somehow or another keep us from getting along as fast as we possibly could to our destination. And so we're going to see how we can today learn to push back some of those things. I'm delighted to have as our first person on this particular program, and he has been one of our heroes, Mr. Secretary. I don't know if you're aware of that, not around the country, you are, sir. One of our heroes in this work. He is the current chairperson of the American III infrastructure investment firm based in New York City. He's also vice chairman of the board of directors of equity owner of Shank Williams, and equity owner, I should say, of Shank Williams Cisneros and Company, LLC, and principal of Seibert Williams Shank and Company, LLC, a national municipal and corporate finance firm. But let me just stop there. That's his sort of background. That's his current sort of titles. Let me tell you who he is, as I understand him to be. He is, first of all, Mr. San Antonio, number one. You cannot talk about San Antonio or go there at all and not know about our speaker this morning. He's from his days as a city council person and then becoming the mayor of that great city, the first Latino to do so of a major city in America, and just has championed himself and served so well in every capacity that one can think of, even to the point of in 1984 being a possible candidate for vice president, at least was interviewed in that capacity. And then, of course, in 1992, becoming involved in federal government in earnest as the designee, and then finally confirmed as the Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It goes on, folks. Credentials, I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to really reserve this time. It's just for a special opportunity for all of us to hear an author, humanitarian, civic leader, public servant, and just also, I understand more than anything, Mr. Secretary, just a great person of high value and highly respected all over this country, indeed in your own community there in San Antonio. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Henry Cisneros. Mr. Secretary.
Jim, thank you so very much. I appreciate that introduction. One of the better introductions I think I've ever had. I appreciate it. And I want to thank my express my appreciation to my fellow panelists who are up this early from around the country to participate in this important session. I want to particularly single out my friend Alejandro Becerra, who I see is on the air now. Alejandro is a long time laborer in the vineyards of housing and opportunity. And in fact, he co-authored a chapter in a major book that's just been published on the outcome of the 1960s civil rights legislation. And his particular chapter is its impact on housing. So he's exactly the right person to involve in this panel and in this effort. It doesn't surprise me that Montgomery County has organized a commission of this effectiveness, nor that it has sponsored this range of fair housing summits. I've long admired Montgomery County, and let me just say, as in my various positions, I've traveled to every single one of the 50 states and 200 different cities. And so I think I have a fairly good sort of scan of the way local government works in our country. And Montgomery County has always been in the forefront of innovation and responsive government and good quality of life, and worked hard at making that an inclusive concept. So, Jim, I congratulate you personally on your work and your colleagues in putting this effort together to continue to make life better in Montgomery County. And as has always been the case, things that start in Montgomery County ripple across the country and find themselves in other places. I want you to know that that's the case. People refer to Montgomery County initiatives, funding, programs, legislation, and then try to replicate it across the country. Thank you for that. I will be brief this morning. I'm honored to be asked to say a few framing words for these panels. But let me begin just by underscoring once again what we all know, the significance of housing as a precondition for almost every other kind of social progress we want to make in the country. I used to say when I was HUD secretary, it's very difficult for a family to think about a job and the preparation for a job, the communications that have to precede a job. It's hard to think about how to stabilize a quality of life for children, with place to study, place to rest, place to be safe. It's hard for people to heal when they have been sick, when they're older and the frailties of life take their toll without a decent place to live. It's just a central question in the human story that every evening when dark comes, when the world becomes more unsafe, when the elements become colder or more violent, that one have a decent place to live. And decent includes not just the quality of the structure, but whether it's affordable or not, whether people can actually be in there without completely compromising their life and overspending. So housing is fundamental. And we know we have in our country a range of housing options that range from housing issues that range from addressing homelessness, those Americans who are completely unhoused, those who are on the street, that segment of the population where the number of homeless who are older is growing, the number of homeless who are mothers with children is growing. We have cities right now where the dominant issue, the number one issue in the city, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, is homelessness. And it's a tragedy. Prosperous places, leading edge of our technology sector, number one problem, people living on the sidewalks, people living on staircases, people living on the streets. Homelessness, we proceed to public housing, where we've made some important innovations, but we need more. All kinds of subsidized housing structures, from vouchers to other mechanisms for housing. We proceed to a discussion of entry-level rentals that are affordable. There isn't one metropolitan area in America today, not one, where a person earning the minimum wage can afford the fair market rent on a 2-bedroom apartment. It doesn't exist in America. We just haven't, we have a shortage of affordable rental housing. Same picture with respect to entry-level home ownership. Very difficult now to build that entry-level home ownership. And as a result, the home ownership rate for African Americans and Latinos has dropped from the peak that we were able to achieve in the late 90s when it rose to almost just at 50%. And now it's been knocked back to the 42 and 43% that it was before. The Great Recession really was a body blow. The pandemic, of course, after that, we're recovering still and have immense work to do going forward to build more housing. So across a range of housing types and housing strategies, we have an active country. Now, let me just say, I think the fundamental issue today in most communities is housing supply. We're just not building enough supply. Supply to allow rentals to be affordable, supply to create entry-level home ownership units, supply of housing for homeless people. We are not building enough supply. And Jim, that is itself a civil rights issue, because buried in that issue of lack of supply is things like exclusionary zoning, large lot zoning, NIMBY reactions to keeping people out of communities, local governments that are not sensitive, they're not courageous enough to say, no, we need to have more affordable housing and take hard stands to make sure that it's built. So there's a whole series of subordinate questions before we can address the fundamental question of housing supply. The other issue that I want to highlight across from supply is fair housing. When I became HUD secretary, I recognized immediately that I had a range of traditional assistant secretary positions, each of which ran important parts of the department, such as FHA, that's a part of HUD, and what's called community development, another part of HUD, and many other elements which focus on some specific functional increase in housing or housing programs or community development programs or public housing, etc. But a very underutilized aspect of the department and underappreciated aspect of the department has always been fair housing. And what I discovered in that era, and I've noted ever since, is that without strong enforcement of fair housing rules and regulations, the rest of the system doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We had testers from the Urban Institute who would go out and prove that discrimination and segregation continue to be rampant in our society. We'd have a tester go out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon who was African-American, who was well-educated, who had a job, to answer an ad for an apartment in a suburban community, and was told, oh, we're just so sorry that you arrived a few minutes late because we just rented that last apartment. It's just not available. An hour later at 2 o'clock, we'd send a tester who was in every respect the same: economic, the way they were dressed, job description, everything else except for one characteristic. This person was white. And the landlord would say, oh, absolutely, let me show you the apartment. I've got the key right here. Let's go on up and look at it. Just caught blatantly, and that continues to exist. And so when economists say, you know, this is the things we need to do to produce more housing, but they skip attention to the issue of discrimination, they're missing the way the housing market actually works for too many people and prevents people from getting access. And so it's false. It's a false set of strategies that come from that. We have to be more attentive to the human rights issues, to the civil rights issues, to the anti-discrimination initiatives, or the housing sector doesn't work for everybody. All the good things we can do, all the allocations, all the imagination, all the creative programs do not work if in the final analysis, on the street, in the market, there is that level of bias, that level of barrier, that level of obstacle. And these are the things that we need to address in a conference such as this. And let me just say, I hope that this is a conference that goes beyond general agreement amongst us who are believers, but actually results in some new and creative ideas that can then be shared with the local governments and across the country, with the federal government, And because this is the only way we're going to make the kind of impact we need to in the housing sector. I'll close by just saying there's one other area of work that's very important these days, and I'm sure it raises its head in Montgomery County, and that is what goes under the rubric of preservation of the housing stock. Because we're losing a lot of housing stock, some to deterioration, but some to developers who wipe out whole blocks, buy up what is presently the only stock of affordable housing and put more expensive housing on it, or people who raise the rents on single family homes that are being rented, duplexes that are being rented because they can, because in the shortage of housing, people are willing to, some people have the capacity to pay more. And the result is the loss of the affordable housing stock. We need initiatives that go under the rubric of anti-displacement strategies and anti-gentrification strategies if we want to do the first order of business, which is to sustain the stock of affordable housing that we have now. It kind of makes logical sense. Before we can add to the total stock, we have to preserve what we have, or we're leaking out of the bottom as we add housing at the top. So those are some themes that I hope, Jim, are on the agenda for today. I believe with the range of people that you have assembled, it is highly likely that you're going to hear some very important ideas for going forward. And I can see from the lineup already on the computer here that you have some people well placed to take action. That is the key word, to take action. A conference with well-intentioned people, with good ideas, with an emphasis on converting them to action. Thank you very much for allowing me to say a few words at the opening.
Secretary, thank you ever so much. And maybe you've already just done that in terms of a charge for those of us who are listening. We've got advocates on the a program this morning, Mr. Secretary. We've got folks who are engaged on the front lines as those who are part of the mortgage process and lending process as well.
Correct.
You in your term were able to advance home ownership to the highest rates ever when you were in that role with HUD. And I'm going to ask this quick question. This was not on your agenda, but let me ask you a real quick question that you get on with your day. But from a policy standpoint, are we doing the kinds of things that will allow us, notwithstanding, as we've learned through the two previous sessions we've had with this particular effort on behalf of our Human Rights Commission, most of the discrimination that we really encountered was government sanctioned. And we believe then that how do we get beyond this whole idea of strategically putting together kinds of policies that addresses all the things you talked about, but at the same time, allowing folks to really realize, you said take action. How do we get people in homes? How do we make that happen? It seems to me, with all the resources we have in this country, the richness of this country, why we are still dealing with the same issue that you dealt with back in 1992.
Yeah.
Give me some hope.
Well, Jim, let me just say, first of all, there's a lot of factors working against us as we try to get people into entry-level home ownership and create affordable housing. A lot of factors, including the problems at the moment with interest rates and supply chain. Those are momentary. But other things like the offshoring of jobs and the loss of good middle income jobs for families, the staircase ladder of job starts that now allow minority people to get to the point where they have money, some kind of income, some of the breakdowns in access to education and training, which have been very serious. That's why some of the efforts that the president is making with respect to training and the new infrastructure strategy to create jobs that people can then be trained for, it all kind of fits together. We've all had a number of things that have been working against us now for the last almost 20 years, since the run up to the Great Recession and all this time. Now, I think, as I said earlier, one of the answers is to enhance the supply. Now, let me just say, this is a difficult and sensitive point, because minority advocates have not always been the driving force demanding more affordable supply. We're just not in the supply business. We leave that to the development community, or to the people who are doing low-income housing tax credits, or to the bankers, or someone else. And sometimes we find that our environmental friends are not friendly in this arena and creating blockages themselves. And so I would say the time has come for an alliance with those who absolutely need affordable housing, meaning advocates for low-income people, advocates for people of color, labor, which benefits from the job creation, local government officials who represent the communities I just described. But we just need an emphasis on having more housing available, more rentals that are affordable, more vouchers, more low-income housing tax credits, more public housing, more housing for homeless. The answer is more. And so that's part of what we need to be doing. The other pieces all fit. Obviously, every time we can create a training program that results in 30 young people going through a training program and coming out with skills that allows them to be craftsmen or technicians or techs, all of that is part of the equation, because we're empowering them with money, with income, with a personal budget that allows them to get into housing. So again, all of these pieces fit together. But when Dr. King spoke about the civil rights transition to economic rights, and then in the 1960s, that was followed by a whole series of programs to begin to create a new kind of economic rights agenda, they were absolutely right. And it's time, once again, in the new setting, a new, more technological economy, a new, more services-oriented economy, an economy that's focused on new media and international trade and business and professional services. Got to remember that mass demographic of people who are African-American and Latino and Asian, and people who are disabled, and people who are presently homeless, and people who are LGBT, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, we're going to end up with what we have been trying to avoid for 50 years now, which is a separate class, a permanent underclass of people who could never break out. And let me just close by saying that permanent underclass can be addressed, but absolutely, without a doubt, one of the principal instruments we have to have is housing policy to get people into homes. Because as I said at the very outset of my remarks, housing is a precondition for much of the other social progress we want to make. We take it for granted, but if a person doesn't have a safe place to keep their possessions, to be safe, to have peace, to reorganize their life every night for the next day of work, for the next day of school for their children, all of the other social objectives we have are undercut. Housing, 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 available housing, affordable housing. That's the drill.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to say this real quickly and just simply say now, are you available for public office, by the way? Again?
No. I've been there, done that.
Okay, very good. And you have done it quite well, sir. Again,
thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much this morning.
Thank you for being so kind in your words. More importantly, thank you for your leadership in helping organize an event like this, and your leadership day in and day out over the course of the year.
We appreciate it immensely, sir. All the best, sir, to you and your family. All the best.
I'll be quietly listening here.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Well, to our panelists, you certainly have been given, I believe, some marvelous opportunities to sort of have your thoughts that you may have already had in front of you, but now even more crystallized as we talk about the next topic. And this is this idea that we've got then these headwinds that are out there, and we are trying to figure out ways then to have them not be the thing that keeps us from reaching our destination more quickly than not. Our first panel up will be looking at this issue and try and help us sort of look at this whole idea and this whole piece about, again, the productivity. How do we produce the housing? And so we're very, very, very pleased to have with us persons who help us get to that point of this discussion. And our moderator for this session is Frank Fuentes, who is also a person who is on the front lines, began his career in mortgage lending many years ago. He now is the National Vice President of Multicultural Lending, a nationwide lending firm, but cut his teeth, as it were, with New American Funding, a national direct lending company, mortgage company across America, some 20 years ago, and was one of the first persons hired by the president, Patty Arvillo, and then Rick Arvillo, to begin this whole call center idea back in 2003, I understand, Frank. And so it began very, very modestly, but now it's a national firm for which you give credit to having gotten you to where you are today in terms of your professional career. Here's what Frank really is known for. Frank understands, first of all, the complexities and the cultural challenges that are lay ahead for many of our underserved communities, and has dedicated his life and his career life to making real sure that those kinds of inequities find some balance, some way of, again, assembling themselves where accessibility for all those persons indeed is a reality. And I just got to know him just a few days ago, but I tell you, I already appreciate what he's doing, what he has done. And so now, without any further delay, Frank Fuentes will take us through then the discussion on this next issue that lays in front of us, keeping ahead of those headwinds. Frank, take it away.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Jim. I really appreciate that. I'm super happy and excited to be moderating this panel here where, like you said, we'll be discussing providing access to affordable housing. And as you know, as you just read in my bio, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, considering that I have personally assisted thousands of minority families with achieving their dream of ownership in my 23-year career. I've never stopped originating. When I started in the mortgage business in 2000, I started as an originator. I made it through the financial crisis. I became a VP of one of the top lenders to minorities in the country. But during that whole time, I never skipped a beat, and always to this moment kept a pulse on what's going on in the market and really be truly keen to the needs of minorities out there. So super happy to be here, excited. And without further ado, I would like to introduce this star-studded panel of speakers. And I'll tell you a little bit about each of our panelists here. First of all, I'm going to start off with Jim Parrott. Jim Parrott is a non-resident fellow at the Urban Institute and co-owner of Parrott Ryan Advisors, which provides strategic advice on a wide range of housing finance issues. Parrott served in the Obama White House as a senior advisor at the National Economic Council, where he led the team charged with the counseling of Sean Donovan at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Prior to his time in public policy, Parrott was a litigator, first in New York with Sullivan and Cromwell, and later in North Carolina with Smith Anderson. He served in Sri Lanka with the Peace Corps, has a BA in philosophy from the University of North Carolina, an MA in philosophy from the University of Washington, and a JD from Columbia Law School. Wow, very impressive. He lives with his family in Chapel Hill. Moving on, we have Mr. Michael Fratantoni. He is the MBA's chief economist and senior vice president of research and industry technology. In this role, he is responsible for overseeing the MBA's industry surveys and benchmarking studies, economic and mortgage origination forecasts, industry technology efforts, and policy development research for both single-family and commercial multifamily markets. Additionally, Frantantoni is a member of the board of directors of MISMO, MISMO, and the membership committees of MERS, also known as MERS. Prior to joining the MBA, Frantantoni worked in risk management and senior economist roles at Washington Mutual and Fannie Mae. He received a PhD in economics from Johns Hopkins University and a BA in economics from the College of William and Mary, and has served as an adjunct professor at the University of Washington and Johns Hopkins, George Washington, and Georgetown universities. Very impressive as well. Last but not least, we've got Anna Tolentino. Anna is a mortgage industry leader with 20 years of experience committed to helping families purchase a home. She's licensed in Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Florida, and North Carolina. Anna began her career as a loan originator for a high-producing team where she used her bilingual skills to assist and respond to the needs of Hispanic borrowers. Her role as a senior home loan consultant for the Anna team at Main Street Home Loans affords her the opportunity to offer an exceptional level of personalized service. As a single mother, Anna enjoys working with single parents, investors, business owners, and takes pride in her ability to think outside the box and successfully structure complicated transactions. She is well-versed in residential loans, but as a top lender, she specializes in first-time homebuyer programs, and she's highly familiar with grant programs and 100% financing loans for qualified applicants. She is also listed as one of the top 250 Latino loan originators by the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, also known as NAREP, top 100 loan originators by the National Association of Minority Mortgage Bankers of America, also known as NAMBA, and was ranked as one of the nation's top 1% mortgage originators in 2015, 2017, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 22. Wow, extremely expressive, Anna. Anna's drive and determination to increase home ownership rates in the community and among Hispanic families is her specific way of giving back. She aims to give clients as much knowledge as possible so they can make informed decisions. She provides education on credit scores, tax returns, and encourages her clients to view real estate as more than a house, but also as an investment. Anna graduated from George Mason University with a degree in political science and a minor in law and information technology. Oh, interesting. I did not know that, Anna. She's a single mother to a beautiful teenage girl, and when she isn't helping clients finance their dream, she enjoys spending time with friends, family, her cats, Zuko, Ghost, and Lucy, and her Yorkie, Roxy, traveling and tending to her investment properties. Wow, very impressive group of panelists, and I'm excited to start the dialogue and start getting some golden nuggets and really dig into some of these issues that were framed by Henry and Jim in prior remarks. So with that being said, I'd like to start off with Jim and Michael. And first I'm going to go over to you, Jim. And the first question here is, what programs or initiatives under the administration have provided funding or incentives for housing construction or rental and home ownership buyer assistance, especially funds that have gone directly to state and local governments?
Thanks for the question. Thanks to you guys for having me. It's worth taking a step back and thinking about what the administration has been wrestling with over the last, say, 2 years, to kind of give a bit of context to how they're thinking about housing policy now. They came into power in the middle of a pandemic, and so their initial focus was really on keeping folks in their homes. It was, mass forbearance, it was massive rental relief, eviction moratoriums, and that kind of thing. And then when they finally came out of the sort of crouch that we found ourselves in, they really ran head on into what Henry mentioned, which is a dramatic supply shortage. And we've got this really difficult, long-standing, but particularly acute now, mismatch between supply and demand, and that's leading to a real affordability challenge that is different than they've faced in the past. Like back when I was in the White House in the Obama years, much of our affordability focus was on the demand side. So we really wrestled with down payment assistance and expanding the credit box and things that would get more folks from underserved communities into homes. And these guys, at least early, haven't really been able to focus on that because they've been focused so much on the supply shortage. And so that's created sort of two challenges in getting folks into from underserved communities into homes they can afford. One, the administration has been spending much of its time and energy pushing Congress to appropriate funds, change the tax code and things to make that shortfall less acute. But two, they've been really nervous, frankly, about pushing a whole lot on the demand side in the way that we used to, because if you don't increase the supply of housing and you increase demand, then you really run the risk of just running up home prices in a way that undermines affordability. And so they've been a little nervous, frankly, about leaning in on the sorts of stuff that a Democratic administration, historically has leaned in pretty heavily towards. All that said, there are two sort of caveats to that. One is the FHFA, so the regulator of Fannie and Freddie, introduced back in 2021 a requirement that Fannie and Freddie develop what they call equitable housing plans, which are really intended to deal with exactly this problem. That is the problem of the dramatic difference in the homeownership rate between historically underserved communities and white communities. And so Sandra Thompson, has required Fannie and Freddie to develop strategies that come up with ways to deal with the low homeownership rate in Latino and Black communities in particular. And so what they've done over the last 2 years, which I'm somewhat hopeful about, is they've come up, both of them, Fannie and Freddie, have come up with a mix of measures that they will experiment with and ultimately take the successful ones and scale them up, that are designed to close this homeownership gap. And so Freddie has focused on down payment assistance and wedding housing counseling up with eligible folks for the down payment assistance programs. They've also focused on ways to expand their underwriting so that they can reach more deeply into communities that often don't have credit scoring at all, or where they do have credit scoring, it doesn't accurately reflect the credit risk in those communities. So I'll give you an example. Historically, the credit rating system has not really assessed the credit risk of Latinos all that well, as you know all too well. Latinos are sort of disproportionately likely to have multiple family members contributing towards the paying of bills, including the mortgage, but the underwriting system that we've got in place doesn't really have a way to evaluate multiple family members kicking in to help cover the bills. Latinos are more likely than others to pay in cash rather than credit with a lot of their bills, and the credit risk assessment system doesn't really have a way of assessing credit risk where a family pays its bills more often in cash. And then most importantly, Latinos are more often to be self-employed than employed by a W-2 employer. And again, the credit evaluation system doesn't really have a way to manage that all that well, all of which means that the credit risk in Latino communities tends to not evaluate very accurately the credit risk involved in the Latino community. And that has an effect over time of depressing access to homeownership in a way that is avoidable. And so Freddie's trying to get their arms around how they can solve that. Fannie, for their part, and then I'll stop, is focused on closing costs. Those are really high fixed costs that disproportionately impact those that are taking out smaller loans. And so Fannie's looking for ways to bring those costs down. And they're also looking at appraisal bias. We're, I think, as you read in the paper almost daily, coming to realize that there's a pretty significant challenge out there. And so Fannie's working with stakeholders to figure out ways to address that. And so taking a step back, Fannie and Freddie are both pretty aggressively trying to figure out what measures they can lean into to move the dial And then those measures that they find with stakeholders to be impactful, they will then scale up over time. And then I think what will happen as interest rates cool off a little bit, and we see inflation, cooling off a little bit. First, I think the administration will get a little more comfortable with leaning back into demand side help, leaning back into traditional down payment assistance programs, moves to expand the credit box, things that we used to focus on back in the Obama years. So my sense is the next 2 years will be a little more demand side focused than the first 2 years were. And hopefully Fannie and Freddie can lead the way a bit.
Thank you for that, Jim. That's it's definitely good to hear that the agencies definitely have it top of mind and that are working diligently on those initiatives. Great to hear. Michael, over to you. Would you like me to repeat the question for you, or you got it?
No, that's great, Frank. Thank you. And again, appreciate the invitation. Good to be here with Jim. Jim, haven't seen you in a bit. I really want to respond to some of the Secretary's comments. I thought Secretary Cisneros was absolutely dead on in focusing on just the importance of supply. If you look from 1970 to 2009, in this country, we were typically building between 16 and 18 million housing units. If you look across the full spectrum, single family, detached, condos, small multifamily, large multifamily, manufactured, anywhere somebody could live, 16 to 18 million units. If you look from 2010 to 2019, 11 million, right? Absolutely shocking at a time when the population had grown, when household formation was actually picking up. Right now we have 50 million people in this country between 28 and 38. Peak ages for young adults going out on their own, often looking to buy a home. So as Jim mentioned, just this incredible mismatch between where the demand is and where the supply is. And I guess sort of a caveat is we're not going to solve that problem with finance. We're not going to solve that with making mortgages somewhat more accessible or somewhat more affordable, or even making rent somewhat more affordable or accessible. We just need more units. And so that's really a question. Local government, state government, changing zoning, really adding more density where people want to work and where they live. And this is a bigger picture question than just how do you qualify a borrower, or how do you make things a little more affordable on the margin. I think another point that I'd make is many of us here on the panel today, lived through the Great Recession and the housing boom prior to that. I think, to my point, that was an example where we sort of led with finance and thought that would be enough. If you just gave people credit, that would get them into homes, but overlooked that I have to insist that it's also sustainable home ownership, that you put them in a loan that they're going to be able to afford for the long term, that as their income grows, they get more and more stable. They don't have a payment shock, for example, which results in a delinquency or in many cases a foreclosure, as we got through the 2008 crisis. So the importance of sustainability, particularly on the ownership side, but it's true on the renter side as well. You want to make sure this is a housing situation that people can sustain over time. So we had this supply shortage going into the pandemic. The pandemic was awful in so many ways, but one sort of curious aspect of it, it led to people valuing housing even more, right? They found that not only were they living there, they were teaching their kids, they were working, they were spending more time at home. It actually led to an increase in housing demand across the entire population. So it made the situation that was challenging in terms of supply-demand imbalance prior to the pandemic even worse. And we saw home prices in 2021 increase at the fastest rate we've seen in history. So almost 19%, according to the FHFA. So extraordinarily challenging. Rates jumped, rates more than doubled last year in terms of 30-year mortgage rates. Certainly cooled off demand, but I'm just going to completely agree with Jim here. I mean, this is a couple of years where demand is suppressed because of the reduction in affordability. Home prices are not growing nearly at the same pace. We think they'll be roughly flat at the national level the next couple of years. But I think out of that, we're back in the soup again, right? Because we still have this persistent supply demand mismatch. So I guess my plea along with the secretary is, if you're in a policy position, and I live in Montgomery County, we need more housing, right? And that's really sort of across the board.
Can I follow up on that? Because I'll tie it back to the policymaking piece, because I agree 100% that if you don't address the supply shortfall, then the demand measures that we would normally lean into not only will be necessarily helpful, they could be a little counterproductive. So it's sort of existential to all this to do what we can to increase supply in the communities that need it. One of the challenges that federal policymakers face in all of this is the degree to which this is such a local problem. An economist, Mark Zaney, and I did a paper on the supply shortfall years ago, and Mark did an analysis that found that zoning was overwhelmingly the biggest driver in the increase in the cost of building new homes. And it's because it constrains the land you can use to build on, and then makes even the land you use more expensive and so forth. But it's local decision making that drives how hard it is to find land to build on. The administration sees that they are a little limited in what they can do, but what they've increasingly focused on is tying federal funding to local decision making around zoning. So if you're a community that has more inclusive zoning, it's going to be easier for you to get HUD funding. It's going to be easier for you to get DOT funding. And over time, I hope the administration, this administration, subsequent administrations will continue down that path so that communities can, continue to think about inclusionary zoning as something that should be their default, not something that they have to make a niche sort of effort. But I do think that ultimately finding ways to get communities to think differently about what problems they're solving for, which Henry mentioned at the beginning, working with environmentalists and so forth to have them on our side rather than opposed to us, is going to be pretty important to overcoming this over the long term. And if we don't, then this is going to be a pretty intractable problem for a long time to come.
Hey, Jim, but wouldn't you agree, though, it's really curious. This is the odd issue where at the federal level, there's pretty much agreement that there's bipartisan agreement that there's a supply shortage, right? If you look at the state level,
but at the local level, it's brutal.
No, but at the state level now, you have governors of Massachusetts, California, and Florida leaning into local policymakers to try. So it's what you said. This is a local issue where the higher levels of government just don't seem to be able to get purchase on it. It's really curious.
Yeah, all true.
Thank you both so much for that great insight. I want to take advantage of asking you a quick question, Michael, since you are in tune with mortgage data and statistics. And I was just curious, as I was hearing you talk, I was thinking about mortgage denials with minorities. Do you have any insight on that as to where we stand based on maybe 2022 HMDA data? Just so we can kind of get a real feel of maybe areas where we need to focus for those individuals that are mortgage ready.
Yeah, great question. So we don't have the 22 data yet, but the patterns really very consistent over time. If you look at gross denial rates, they do tend to be higher for Black Americans, Hispanic Americans who are applying for a mortgage loan. And the reason for denial, consistent over time: debt to income too high, credit scores too low. So, the sort of core measures of affordability and sort of how they've managed their credit in the past. To the mortgage ready point, Freddie Mac has done really fantastic work trying to quantify how many individuals out there are mortgage ready. And sort of their definition is under 45, so in that prime first-time buyer category, strong credit, so a credit score above 660, and ability in the market where they live to have a debt-to-income ratio which is reasonable. That would allow them to qualify. You look across the country, 38 million people mortgage ready today. 8 million Hispanic Americans, 3.1 million African Americans mortgage ready today. Unfortunately, as we've talked about, there's only 1.5 million homes on the market, right? So that really is the overriding constraint.
Thank you for that, Michael. And with that, we're going to move over to Anna Tolentino. So Anna, what are some examples of down payment and closing cost assistance and low down payment programs that are available and are increasing home ownership opportunities considering the inventory levels we have now for first-time buyer that are minorities?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Thanks, Frank, for that wonderful introduction also earlier. So in our area, in the states that I'm licensed in, specifically in Maryland and Virginia and DC, there are several local programs that are state-run or city-run. In Maryland, for example, there's a Maryland Mortgage Program in which they provide up to a 5% second loan to be able to use towards down payment and closing costs. That has been fantastic because the income limits also for these programs are in the mid six figures. So in areas such as Montgomery County, Prince George's County, where you have these slightly higher incomes because housing is so much more expensive, it really does help those buyers who don't make too little but make too much. So it's that happy medium. And so we've been able to utilize that program immensely, both among minority communities and other communities, to help more people become home buyers. The struggle we're seeing right now, especially in our area, in Maryland, in Virginia, in DC, has been this major, I know that nationally things have slowed down, but in Virginia, we're still seeing 4 to 5 contracts on properties. They come out, they're gone within 2 days. And so the biggest challenge right now is educating sellers and listing agents that just because you have a down payment assistance program doesn't mean you don't qualify as equally as someone who has 20% down. And so that, I think, is something that we can have as many down payment assistance programs as we would like to have, but if they're not being accepted by sellers, then it's really for nothing in a way. And so part of what I have to do as a lender is educate the seller and the listing agent that just because they're using down payment assistance program doesn't mean they don't have maybe money. Maybe they're utilizing that money for repairs or closing costs or other things. And why wouldn't you take advantage of some down payment assistance to help you get into a home so you're not, completely wiped out by the time you get there? So that has been a challenge. I think that we definitely need, as boots on the ground, we have to have loan officers and real estate industry professionals educate both sellers and listing agents. I mean, another problem we're having is with VA loans. Many of our veterans aren't able to secure homes because sellers would prefer a conventional loan over a VA loan, especially if they're saying they're putting 20% down, which is really sad to see because I work with a lot of veterans who deserve a home, who have worked for it, who have earned that right, and unfortunately aren't able to use it. In Virginia, we have another program. If they have both a grant and a second loan with high income limits, high sales price limits. Also, I believe they go up to 5 in the mid 500s. So those programs are being utilized. The problem that we're also running into is that a lot of these programs carry very high interest rates compared to regular rates, which then reduces what clients can qualify for. And so we're having to be creative. I mean, a lot of the times I'm having to have clients find down payment so that we can stretch their ratios a little bit higher. We use a program called Home Ready, which is through Fannie Mae, which allows border income, which means especially multi-generational or homes in the Hispanic community where maybe someone doesn't declare or we can't use tax returns or doesn't have the credit. If they contribute to the main person who's on the loan a certain amount every month, not to equal more than 30% of their income, we can use that income to help people qualify for more. So there's tons of programs, and if anyone's looking for their specific state, you can go to the HUD website. There are the down payments available in your area. Also, a lot of lenders carry their own down payment assistance programs. Chenoa exists with many lenders. FHLB has a program also. So it's just reaching out to different lenders, talking to real estate professionals to figure out what is available in your region.
Hey, Frank, could I add just one point to what Anna was saying? I think she made a really good point. So when you look at the data, roughly 3/4 of African-American home buyers use FHA or VA loans. About 2/3 of Hispanic home buyers use FHA or VA. As Anna said, VA is a fantastic option, 100% loan to value. FHA 3.5% down. We just saw a good reduction in the FHA mortgage insurance premium, making that a better product. But I think we need to get the word out there that sometimes, as Anna said, real estate agents are hesitant to take an offer from someone using FHA or VA financing. And it's really, really discouraging some of these buyers, I think. I mean, Anna, that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it's frustrating for me because I see the disparity. You know, I see, so why, unfortunately, it's not a lot of Hispanics that have 20% down. We do have, or African Americans. It tends to be white or Asian or Middle Eastern who have saved these large amounts of money, or they are getting gifts from family. And it's really frustrating. I mean, I have one particular family, they're young, they're looking for a specific school system. And he calls me, he's like, well, my realtor doesn't want me to use my VA loan. And I'm like, you have a right, you've earned this right. Like, you deserve this loan. And so I had to convince the client, like, it's not going to be a better situation if you go FHA or conventional. VA is the route to go. Just whenever you submit an offer, let me know who the agent is. I will call them. And I do work with some professionals who, I mean, they win because they educate the seller. We put in other things in there that say, you know, quick home inspection contingencies or quick financing contingencies, which we as a lender work with, so that the client definitely gets the better option.
And it goes back to the supply problem, right? Where you've got, you know, 6 buyers that are lining up to put a bid in on a house, and 3 of the buyers, you know, 1 buyer's got cash because they're an investor. 2 buyers have a Fannie or Freddie, you know, conventional loan that can be turned around pretty quickly. And the rest have VA or FHA, which, you know, can be a little more complicated for the buyer to manage, and the seller's got all the leverage. You know, who you think they're going to pick. So it's been this challenge. It's one of the more challenges that's driven by this supply imbalance.
And that's the problem, is that FHA is not any really different. The only difference is that if there's peeling paint, if the house was built between 72, and most buyers are willing to, if they really want the house, they're willing to send a handyman beforehand. I mean, in many situations, the agent and I are willing to pay someone $200 to go, you know, I'll go do it.
Right.
Our client gets in there, and but see, that's the problem, is everyone thinks that FHA is harder. It's not. I can underwrite it as quickly as a conventional. I can get an appraisal back as quickly as a conventional. The only difference is you're not going to put 20% down on an FHA unless you really have to. You know, you're going to do the minimum, because that's the point of the program, is for you to keep your money. And part of that education is, why would you do more than 3.5% if you don't need to? Instead, take that money and buy an investment property afterwards, or invest it in the stock market, or put it in your 529 for your kid. See, that's the misconception here. So we need to educate people that just because you're not putting all your money in a property doesn't mean that you're not as equally eligible, or your loan isn't as competitive.
That's awesome. Thank you for that insight, Anna. Very, very valuable information that I'm sure is going to be able to readily available for any consumers that may be looking to purchase a home here. Next, we're moving on to Jim and Michael. Starting with you, Jim, going back to you. What can be done to compensate for the fact that many minority households don't own homes and therefore are not able to leave a home behind for their children or to help them buy a home?
Yeah, I mean, the question in a way makes it clear why this is such a big deal, right? So you've got this enormous wealth gap in the country between communities of color and white communities, and it comes down in large part to the difference in home ownership. You know, it's been the way that middle class has built wealth over time, And because, fewer families of color have been able to buy a home, fewer have been able to build wealth. And there's this vicious circle where they then don't have wealth to pass on to their kids to make their first down payment. As an example, I think 40% of FHA borrowers use some form of down payment assistance to buy their first home. And most of that down payment assistance comes from family, it doesn't come from government programs. And communities of color often don't have the same level of transgenerational wealth to help out, which gives them a bit of a headwind in all this. So I think, as the question implies, we got to find ways to provide more assistance, both to reduce closing costs, as Fannie's trying to do in communities of color in particular, and to help on down payment assistance, to find ways, whether it's within the FHA channel or otherwise, to lower that hurdle for borrowers. And there are a bunch of different outlets now that do this. State housing finance agencies are often a useful source. The federal home loan banks are a useful source. Fannie and Freddie increasingly are getting into finding ways to help provide down payment assistance. And if you look at the numbers, there have been critics of down payment assistance in the years past that suggest that there's something about down payment assistance that makes those loans inherently unsustainable. But if you look at the numbers, as long as somebody puts down some down payment, their default risk isn't that much different than somebody that puts down a fair amount more down payment. So the difference in default rate from 0 down to 1% or 2% down is pretty big, but the difference in default risk from 2% down to 4% down actually isn't that big. So there's a way to push back against critics of policies that incentivize local agencies to provide down payment assistance. But my sense is the key to overcoming that gap in transgenerational wealth is for policymakers to find ways to help folks overcome that hurdle. Because once you do with that first generation, then they'll be in a position to hand on to their kids, the equity they built up in their home, so that their kids aren't faced with the same hurdle they've had. But it's really up to policymakers and to some degree industry leaders to step in and help overcome that down payment hurdle and the closing cost hurdle.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Any thoughts on that, Michael? Comments?
Let me just add a little bit. So, oftentimes when people talk about benefits of home ownership, really the focus is on the financial benefits. And as Jim said, in so many cases, it's a way to build generational wealth that can be passed on. But I think when I look at some of the research, it's some of the non-financial benefits that really are even more impressive. If you look at kids doing better in school, kids doing better in sort of other measures of success in life. And a lot of that can just be traced to more stability. Again, I think all of us heartened quite a bit by the Secretary's comments, right? Just the importance of a safe place to come home. And if someone is moving frequently, it's difficult to get that stability. Home ownership sort of lends itself to a more stable home situation over time. So I think sort of a recognition, and again, I guess I'm heartened, at least at the federal level, sort of bipartisan agreement that this is the direction to go, right? Both more housing and, one side calls it an ownership society, one calls it, the other side calls it a path to generational wealth. They're both pointing in the same direction, right? There's a need to get more people a stake in this country.
Absolutely, I agree. All right, well, let's move on to Anna. So Anna, let's talk to the consumer here. Okay. Thank you for sharing in your previous comments, but now let's talk directly to a consumer, you and I, about how you've helped actual families. I know you mentioned different programs. Now let's talk about providing a few examples of how you personally have been able to help minority households buy a home with or without any assistance that have had special characteristics of multicultural borrowers, such as multi-generational households, a household with more than 1 or 2 co-borrowers, non-occupant co-borrowers, different sources of income, like jobs from the gig economy, self-employed, border income, immigrants or native born, and first generation home buyers. So let's let's really go deep on this, so that when a consumer goes to the website and they find this link, we can touch maybe, I don't know, a couple dozen or maybe a couple hundred or more potential home buyers in the near future.
One of the biggest things that my team and I do is we start people from A. We go from A to Z, and sometimes it can be a 30-day process, sometimes it can be a 5 to 10-year process. And the first thing we do is we educate clients as to their credit score. Why do they need a credit score? Why does it matter if it's low or high? Why should you use credit cards? How should they use them? Especially in the Hispanic community, a lot of clients who lived through 2008, especially, just don't mess with credit cards at all at this point. And so it's educating them like, okay, you don't have to get a $10,000 credit card. Get a secured credit card, charge on it the gas that you pay for your car, pay it off. If you want to pay it off after you charge it, be my guest. So that way you don't feel, but at least you're establishing some type of credit so that the higher your credit score, the better your interest rate, the lower the mortgage insurance, the more program options you have.
Let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there because I want to make sure that, again, if a consumer sees this, I want to make sure that we provide them with some tangible, valuable nuggets they can use. So what I heard there was, number one, if someone doesn't have credit, they come into our office. I still originate, you originate. We pull the credit, it's blank. Number one, go get a secured credit card.
Yeah, so you do that with your local lender.
Okay.
Your local, so if you have, yeah, so I know, like, for a fact, Wells Fargo, Capital One, many credit unions do that. They have, so it's just going and asking the question and saying, do you have a secured credit card? And usually it takes about 6 months if you don't have any credit on your report at all.
What's the difference between a secured credit card and non-secured? Again, consumer centric, so they understand exactly what we're talking about here.
So secured means you have an account with them and you have some funds there. So it's secured against your savings account or your checking account. So the bank gets a little bit more warm and fuzzies that you'll be able to pay the money back. Non-secured means they're literally just doing it based on the information that you've provided them.
Excellent. And then once you get the secured credit card, it pops up on your credit report after how many days would you say on average?
It's 6 months. So if you're starting from scratch, it's 6 months. Now, I also recommend that if you, for example, if you're joint with the husband and your husband or wife has credit, or your mom and your dad has credit, that they include you into one of their credit cards to also help. I say at minimum, you should have 2 of your own credit lines. So if you can open 2, if you have to start with 1 and then open up with 2, what I don't recommend is that you have all authorized user accounts, which means that people have put you on their credit, because that does not constitute a valid credit score. So we walk people through this portion of how to do it. Then I have clients like, oh, we're going to go buy a car. And I'm like, no, please don't do that. Because that affects your debt to income ratio, which we sit down and explain. Debt to income ratio is what your total payments are.
Can I ask you one quick question about credit while we're on the subject? And I think it's important, and I know you've dealt with this. What about borrowers who don't have a social? Can they obtain a secured credit card or a type of credit card?
Yes, they can. And Bank of America seems to be one of the biggest banks that does allow that. As to other banks, I'm not sure, but I know for a fact they can, because I work with a lot of clients. If they're in the middle of their paperwork for their Social Security number, once they get it, we work on helping them transfer their credit to their social from their TIN, and so we can go ahead and lend for them within that next year. And so we work with them on doing that. But if they aren't in the middle of that process, or they don't seem to be getting, there are many programs that will allow them to be able to borrow. And I know, Frank, your company has a great program that allows people with TIN numbers.
Correct. Now, what about those borrowers? Second scenario, we talked about the no credit score scenario. What about a borrower who comes in and their FICO score is, let's say, 560, and they've got several credit cards? What are the recommendations there?
So we have this fantastic tool. It's called the What If Analyzer, where we'll sit there and we'll plug in ways to figure out how to get their score up. So we provide them the exact tasks. We say, okay, you need to drop this credit card to this, you need to pay this collection off. one of the biggest problems we're having are medical collections. Although medical collections are not supposed to affect your score, they still are. I don't think that has officially gone into play, but I'm seeing $20 medical collections, $200 medical collections, bringing down scores about 100 points. And in many situations, many clients don't even know that they've had these collections because they thought their insurance paid for it. Or they said, oh, we thought we took care of it. So walking them through, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to repair your credit is taking that time. And many of them, I tell the clients, they're like, oh, well, can you recommend someone to help me? Yes, we can recommend a credit repair company, but a lot of this stuff can be done by the consumer, especially because now they have English and Spanish operators that can help you, especially if English is not your primary language and Spanish is. So we're more than happy to help, but I also believe that if you really want a home, you're also going to make the effort to go ahead and call and say, hey, I need to take care of this. I need to negotiate this collection. I need to, everyone. And I tell people, especially in a household where you have like 5 or 6 people, you all have to cut your spending, start saving money, contribute to paying these things off if you're going to be the main person on the loan, because this is a group effort. No more eating out, no more going to the movies. I mean, it's for a short period of time so that you can accomplish your goal.
Excellent. Now, moving on to income and multiple sources of income, multiple borrowers, non-occupant borrowers, enlighten us on that topic.
So this is my favorite part because especially in the Hispanic community, there are a lot of self-employed. And, people don't realize that there's ways for you to declare income without having to pay what they think is this enormous amount of taxes. I mean, we have very wealthy individuals that make billions of dollars and pay $6 in taxes at the end of the year. So it's educating them and saying, you can, these are ways, mileage, depreciation, things that we can add back in to help them qualify for more. If they pay their credit cards, a big thing with the Hispanic community is clients use credit cards for the business. They'll use personal credit cards because they don't know that they can open a business credit card, or they personally secure a business credit card and it shows up on their credit. If your business is paying for these credit cards that you're using for your business, we cannot beat you twice for that. If you can show me 12 months that your business has paid for it, a bank statement, I don't count that payment against you. I don't count that car against you, especially a lot of my landscapers, they buy these big vehicles because they need to carry all their supplies. And so they have $800-900 payments that, of course, could make it very difficult when you aren't declaring tons of income because of all your losses. And so paper losses, of course. And so what I have to do is educate them and say, okay, you need to open a business account. You need to pay this out of this account. Let me connect you with someone to help you do that. Let me talk to your accountant. A lot of these people who are doing these tax returns are not accountants. They're bookkeepers, or they're not as savvy as to what we look for in originators. So it's sitting with the tax preparers too and saying, okay, this is how I calculate income. Is there a way for you to utilize these methods when doing their tax return? And in counseling buyers, I mean, I have many clients who will send me their 2021 returns. And they'll say to me, Anna, I can declare this much. How much would that qualify me for? And then we sit down and say, okay, well, you definitely need to file this, but then you may need 1 more year of tax returns. Or if they've been self-employed for 5 years, we can get away with just 1 tax return. If we go Freddie, Fannie is also allowing us now in certain situations to go 1 year. So it's figuring out creative ways. But the main part of it is educating the consumer and saying, okay, let's sit down, let's look at your paperwork, let's figure out how we can do this so that you can get the goal of buying.
Excellent, excellent. Now let's also touch on another very common issue that comes up with minority lending is down payment and gifts, right? Taking down payment assistance out of the equation, a lot of minority borrowers have access to cash or situations where they can come in with a down payment. But like you said, we need to get creative and educate borrowers as to how to do that and the possibility of doing that.
I don't know you all have seen the meme where it's like, oh, where's your down payment? And the guy's pulling up, or a person is pulling up the mattress and it's all sitting there. And every time I see it, I chuckle because every conversation, every email I put out, I said, please don't deposit cash in your accounts. Or where is the money coming from? Oh, it's okay, I have it. Okay, but where is it? And that's this question is, where is it? And just educating people. A lot of the times I have clients who have cash and I can document that they've been taking it out of their accounts. And so it's showing that and doing that. I have a lot of people that do, they call them Zuzus, or where they're these savings clubs where they'll put, you know, $1,000 a week and then it's their turn. FHA allows us to document that. And so it's really sitting down, being non-judgmental. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of, especially American loan officers, is that they sit there and, you know, they go, oh, well, that's just, you know, where's that money coming from? It's understanding, like, I remember when I was a child, I grew up in DC, and there was a bank that, it was a Salvadorian bank, and my parents are Salvadorian. And we had a lot of Salvadorians in our community, and they put all their money in that bank. It bankrupt. They closed their doors and people lost all of their money. I'm talking about thousands. I remember I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old. And so when people come to me and they say, well, I don't understand why people just can't put their money in the bank, I explain that story to them. And I say, would you do that if you knew of someone who lost everything they had ever worked for? Of course, be a little nervous. And so it's understanding and then working with the client, not being, like I said, judgmental, and saying, okay, let's figure out a game plan. So you have this money, we can't document it, but it is your money that you saved. Let's put it in an account. You know, let's talk in 3 months so that it's seasoned. Or, you know, if you can, your mom's going to give you the money, perfect. This is how we do it. Transfer to the title company. Let's show her bank statement to show that she had the money, so that we can work with getting you approved. So, and a lot of the times when I run scenarios, I do 4 scenarios for people. I do bringing a down payment, and down payment assistance, and I say, which one works best for you? And you'd be amazed at how many people go, we're going to find the money. We're going to do it this way because the interest rate is better, the terms are better, and the program is better.
What do you think is the #1 misconception of minority borrowers when they come to you and they make a statement similar to this? Wow, I didn't realize I qualified. And you ran the credit, they've got 700 FICOs, their DTI is 30, they're like the perfect borrower, but they didn't realize it. Okay, but why? What's that misconception?
I think it's just fear of the unknown. You know, it's unfortunately, while we have, I don't want to say we have not like been able to really disseminate information. I feel like the consumer today is much more educated, both Hispanic, minorities, in general, more educated than they were 15 years ago, but it's still just fear of the unknown. And it's such a big investment. If you think, I always tell people, I'm very fortunate to do what I do because I do one of 5 major things, you know, like you graduate or you get married, you have a baby, you know, or you buy your first car. But another thing is you buy your first home. It's scary, especially in our area where you're going to have to spend at minimum $500,000 for a place to live in. So I think a lot of it is just fear, and it's just having to talk to a professional who's going to sit there and answer your questions and get rid of the misconceptions and tell you, yeah, you're good to go, and then just providing even more education. And a lot of it is just reassurance. I mean, sometimes I say I'm more of a counselor than I am a loan officer sometimes, because I have to talk people through some decisions, like, okay, let's talk about pros and cons, and, you know, let's take a deep breath and let's really analyze this instead of doing it based on feeling, do it based on fact.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Anna. I'm sure consumers are going to find this valuable once they get a chance to review it.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just going to add one more thing.
yes, absolutely.
Talk to a loan officer. If you're in the midst, if you don't know, the things we do is create a game plan. I tell people, if we can't do it now, you can at least know the steps you need to take so that if you have to sign another year lease, at least you know what to do. Because the biggest problem is people want to do something, but they don't have the steps, or they don't have the goal in mind of where they need to be. They're just trying to do something based on, well, I think, but it's so much easier to do it with I know.
I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for that, Anna. Now we're going to move on to our closing question, which is going to be for all participants. And we'll start off with Jim, then we'll go to Michael, and then Anna. So the Urban Institute projects that between 2020 and 2040, 70% of new homeowners will be Hispanics, and the remaining 30% will be Asian and Black homeowners. What does this mean, and what will it take to move the needle?
Yeah, so the import of that figure is the face of the housing market, like the face of the nation, is changing, right? It doesn't look like it did 50 years ago. Unfortunately, the mortgage market hasn't changed as quickly as the face of the nation is changing. It's a step or two behind. And it doesn't serve communities of color as effectively as it may, serve others. But it's going to have to adjust, because if you fast forward 10, 20 years, and the homeownership rates of Latinos and folks of color remain what they are today, then the total homeownership rate of the country is going to, fall through the floor. And the macro effect of that for the country, for the economy, would be enormous if you wind up dragging down the homeownership rate of the nation, because groups that aren't well served by the mortgage market wind up becoming the dominant force of new households in the years to come. So that's the scary part in a way. But the upside to it is it's going to force our hand. We don't have a choice but to adjust and find ways to serve these communities better, because the economics are such that it would be too disruptive if we don't. So we're going to have to find ways to, like what we've discussed before, make the underwriting system that we rely on, both in regulation and in industry, more inclusive, so that it's better at assessing the risk of folks in these communities than it has been. And we're going to have to find a way to overcome the burden of putting down a down payment, overcoming closing costs that has been historically such a high hurdle for communities of color, folks in communities of color, to meet. So the good news in all this is, when you talk to policymakers that don't spend a lot of time thinking about the advocate side of all this, when you make the economic argument, the light goes off. They can see that it's something that they have no choice but to solve. And it makes them more committed to getting down to the weeds with the rest of us, to come up with ways to serve these communities better. Because at the end of the day, either the economy is going to be impacted by this demographic shift in a negative way, because it doesn't adjust its processes to serve these communities better. And as a result, we see a shrinkage of the housing market, and with it a shrinkage of GDP, or to adjust in a positive way to serve these communities better, so that we can maintain national homeownership rate, maintain the robustness of the housing market. But in so doing, we're going to have to find a way to open up the mortgage market for these communities that it hasn't served well for decades now.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jim. Next, we'll go over to Michael.
All right, thanks. So I guess start with, again, where we started the morning. The first answer is just getting more housing units built. That is going to address every aspect of this problem. The second, my employer, the Mortgage Bankers Association, has made as its top priority addressing the homeownership gap between white Americans, Hispanic, and Black Americans. And one way we've really addressed that is a program called Convergence. So we've got it in 3 cities now: Memphis, Columbus, and Philadelphia. And we're really just trying to act as a convener to get all the parties together: mortgage lenders, real estate agents, local government officials, try to address, is there something within that market that everybody can agree on to really get more buyers ready and more buyers qualified? So I think we're looking to see, you know, are there common themes that can be developed on this local approach? But as we were talking about at the beginning of our panel, a lot of this really does need to be done at the local level. So again, live in Montgomery County. I think there's certainly a lot we can do here in our own home base. And then last, I would just really commend Anna. She is quite the phenomenal loan officer. We need more like her in our business. So I really look forward to seeing more younger, diverse loan offers to become part of this wonderful industry that we work in. But wow, I would be very happy to send more customers your way. Hannah, very nice to listen to you this morning.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Michael. And next over to Anna.
Can you repeat the question for me, Frank?
Yeah, the question was, the Urban Institute projects that between 2020 and 2040, 70% of new homeowners will be Hispanics and the remaining 30% will be Asian and Black. What does this mean, and what will it take to make this a reality?
So I got this article from my branch manager a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, "Oh, you're going to be fine. You don't need to worry about really generating much business." And it's so exciting to see this, but I think a big hurdle is going to be educating people, getting, you know, there is down payment assistance, but I think we also need to do a better job of reminding people to just save and cut spending. When I bought my first home, I love housing a little too much. I currently own 9 properties, and that I've purchased over, I would say, the last 10 to 15 years. And when people are like, "Oh, we want to do something similar," so I try to educate people on how to buy their first home, but then also how to build a portfolio so that they can leave houses for their kids, and creating trusts. And I go a little bit further based on my knowledge, personal knowledge. And when I tell people, you know, I had a client call me and say, "Oh, we want to mass scale and buy 20 Airbnbs." Had never done it before. And I said, "Why don't you just start with one and figure out how to do it? Save more money from the income you get on their Airbnb and then buy the second one." We live in a society where we are starting to feel like we need everything right now. We need 20 Airbnbs right now. We need to make thousands of dollars right now. We need to buy the biggest home right now. And especially with rates increasing, I've had to change my conversation to, why don't you start with a condo? You already live in an apartment. Why not own it so that you can build equity to buy this townhouse, to buy the single family home? That's how it used to be before rates were 3% and 2%. People would have to start with something small and move up. And with especially the Hispanic community, everybody wants a single family home. And I get it. It's the freedom of being able to park wherever and do whatever, but unfortunately that's not attainable sometimes right away. So it's reminding people, let's start with A, we'll move up to Z, save some money, cut your spending, you know, and do it the old fashioned way. We can use down payment assistance, but have some money so that if you walk into the house and your furnace breaks down, you're not in a situation where you're having to get into debt and get into a situation where you're stressed out again. So I'm excited about these numbers, but I still think there's a long way to go to actually getting these, you know, individuals in homes and doing it in a way so that they don't lose their homes because they overstretched or they weren't prepared, but also so that it becomes one of many so that they can leave a legacy to the other generation.
I agree. Definitely agree with everybody's comments. My ultimate goal and thoughts around this comment is to groom the next generation of minority mortgage leaders, so that way we can, quote unquote, infiltrate the mortgage industry and make a difference from the top down as well. So that's my personal goal, my commitment for the next 10, 15 years. And with that, we will terminate this session. And Jim, do we have time for any Q&A?
Frank, we actually do, and I'm going to pitch one to you real quickly because Honest talked about this, and also Michael and his numbers as well. And what one person suggests is that who was actually in the loan officer role, and her comment is the fact that there's some folks who she deals with that just don't believe housing is attainable for us, for Black folks particularly. How do we get beyond that sort of reality for folks, as it turns out in some instances, or perception, again, for others that may not have even gone that far? Is it attainable for folks who or Black folks, as an example, in the community, or brown folks for that matter? And then when there are, again, these special assistance programs, and I believe that Anna spoke to this as well, and this old idea was that rates get increased. So now people are discouraged from even trying those programs. And then the last thing, I think that Michael's point early on was this issue of supply. If we've got 8.3 million folks who are Hispanic in this community, Latino, and 3.3 folks who are Black looking for housing, and if we're still, again, building housing at the rate, again, ending in 2019 of 11 million homes, that math does not work. I don't care how you use it. So help us sort of pull all that together, folks. I'm asking the panel and all of you, how do we sort of reason with that? Jim, from a policy perspective as well, how do we do that and make this not be something that really is a pipe dream for folks, even though you've given some very practical examples of what we can do? There are still folks who have that perception that you're not really talking about me.
Jim, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I mean, it's much easier for me to speak from a policy point of view than the loan officer point of view. But so let me start with that end of the elephant, I guess, and maybe Anna can speak to the other end. But I mean, we're being a little repetitive here, but it's important to do that, which is we're not undersupplying the market by a little bit. And this is not a short-term problem. This goes back 20 years where we've been undersupplying the market since the recession of 2006, 7, 8, 9. Construction has lagged demand every year for almost 20 years, 15 years. I mean, it's a huge hole that we've gotten ourselves in. And the hole is deepest at the bottom of the market. It's not deep at the top of the market. We've got plenty of houses for rich folks. What we don't have enough housing for are for entry-level homes, especially in communities of color. And so policymakers are going to have to change the math. I mean, one of the things that's problematic here is it's not economic for developers to build at the bottom of the market. And so, we need to use the tax code to make it more economical. We need to use grant funding to make it more economical. And the federal government needs to lean into local decision makers so that they get the headwinds out of the way, through zoning and other restrictions at the local level that make it so hard to build housing where we actually need them. So I think, and that's a congressional lift. There's a fair amount the administration can do around the margins, but in order to come anywhere near the lift that we need, you need Congress to step in. So this needs to be seen as a bipartisan effort and not something that's an add-on to other stuff. It needs to be something that both members of Congress see as central to the sort of our broad economic policy, and not something that, a movement of interest rates or a change in bank stability is going to fix in 6 months. It's something which we need a completely different way of thinking about what it is we're trying to do in housing policy. That's a long-term shift where Congress, dedicates the next budget window of 10 years to spending a hell of a lot more money to make the math work better to supply more housing. So I think fundamentally that's more important than anything else in all of this. Because if you can't fix that, then all the targeted demand side stuff we're talking about will be just way too small in the face of the big headwinds of supply. So macro policy wise, to me, it's all about supply.
Anna, what would you tell that consumer about the possibilities of home ownership in this environment?
I think the biggest thing that we need to work on, it's something that just in general we lack, is educating people from an early age. So making them aware of just general concepts, high school, college, and just through family, through social media, making them aware that homeownership isn't something that you do when you're in your 40s or your 30s. Like, it's something that you should really start in your 20s, and building equity and finding and disseminating information on how to do that. I mean, I think most 20-year-olds think they can't buy a home because they're just like, well, I just graduated college and I just started my first job, and I don't make that much money. But you'd be surprised at how many recent graduates who have offer letters I do loans for, because their parents push them like, hey, you're spending your money on vacations, instead put it towards an investment. So I think a big part is continuing to educate parents, and also start a campaign to really educate. I know TikTok and Instagram is doing a great job of that, but I feel like it needs to be taken more on a big level. Like, I don't remember what I learned in math in high school, but I remember typing, and I remember the skills that I use. I remember learning Microsoft Word because I use those skills now. So really making it a priority to start teaching these things in high school, and start talking about it in college, and making it a requirement. I used to go to a high school. I haven't done it lately because of COVID, but I used to go to a high school and they had a day where they would just teach about generic things, and I would talk about housing. And the amount of questions and excitement that I saw people in being able to say, hey, look, I bought my first home at 21. Now I own, back then it was like 6 or 7. You can do this too, is having role models too, for people to see, hey, she's Hispanic, she came from nothing, and she has 7 homes now, or she has 1 home or 2 homes. Like, making leaders and making people who are involved, make them available and educating from a young age.
Thank you for that.
Jim?
Any other questions there, Jim?
But thank you so much. I want to honor at least this one more, and we've got just a minute or two here, just 1 minute exactly. But to maybe at least look at this, and the question being raised here is, Frank, do we have a certain way of suggesting that a reality comes out of the projected numbers of home ownership? In other words, 7% of the new homeowners in the future, according to the study that you mentioned a minute ago, will be Hispanic homeowners. Will that become a reality? Do we have any sense that in fact will be what will actually happen, or is it just a projection?
Jim?
Yes.
Comment on that, or Michael?
Yeah, it's absolutely just a projection. It's not something it's not gonna happen like the weather. It's something that we got to work towards. All that study says is demographics are such that on net, the white population is declining relative to everybody else. Communities of color are increasing relative to white families. And over time, that means that the new households formed on net are going to be on net households of color. And so the housing market that depends on new household formation is going to depend on its ability to adapt to that shift. And if it doesn't adapt, then you're going to wind up with less demand, smaller housing market, and all the rest. So it's up to us and policymakers to find a way to make sure the system adapts to track that demographic shift. Because if it doesn't, no, those numbers aren't going to happen. All you're going to have is a demographic shift, and the housing market itself won't shift to catch up. It'll just suffer as a result of the shift. So it's going to be up to us to adapt, to take advantage of that shift. It should be seen as an opportunity. You've got a vibrant, young set of communities that are going to move into their sweet spot of home ownership age. And we just need a market that's well set up to receive that and take advantage of it, as opposed to suffer under it. But it's up to us. It's not going to happen on its own.
I guess I would just add that a little bit of a different color on that people are going to vote with their feet, right? If they can move to a location that has the job market, has the housing that they need, they're going to. So that demand is going to show up sort of where it's being most welcomed. So I think, as we've talked about, that sort of there is a federal and a state layer here, but really most of the action in housing is occurring at the local level, and local decisions are going to be really important as to where that demand finds a home.
Frank and panelists, thank you so much for this. I know that we did not get to every question, but we want to make very sure then that we'll have on our website, on the Office of Human Rights website, these persons who have been presenters this morning for you, as well as an actual recording of this session. So you'll be able to go back and reflect on it as we go forward. I do, though, want to move forward because I know one of our speakers is jumping from here to there and trying to make sure she makes all of her meetings and various things. And so I'm going to honor her presence today. But we do have a stretch here, a break that we have put in place here. Just 1 minute, with 1 minute now, maybe two, if you will, just take a quick stretch break for those of you who are there. But let me again thank Frank, thank Anna, thank Michael, and thank Jim. And again, let's give them again how do we do this technologically anymore? But let's give them a techno applause for their thank you, folks, for your work and all that you do. I really appreciate that. So again, just 2 minutes for a quick stretch break. We'll be right back with our next speaker. So hang in there, council member. We'll be right with you. Welcome back, everyone. I really appreciate again your being here this morning for our Fair Housing Summit 3. And before we get too much further, I want to make real sure it's real clear about this particular meeting today. I want to again make sure that our Commissioner Alejandro Becerra really gets front stage on this with his thoughtful way of putting this together. So, Commissioner, thank you again for all your work. This has really been, at least for me, listening, just so enlightening. And so I make real sure that folks know that the energy, the lift, if you will, heavy lift was, again, Commissioner Alejandro Becerra, who's a member of our Human Rights Commission. He was helped also by a number of members of our team members that we'll acknowledge a little bit later on. But I want to make real sure that folks knew that and know the work that he's done and pulling from his colleagues from across the country, this great panel. So again, Commissioner Becerra, thank you. All right, now we're into then the second phase of this, looking at this issue of, again, availability, production. We looked at the supply side, but now let's look at, in fact, where folks can actually see that dream realized in terms of, again, housing opportunities. And so to sort of set the stage for us on this particular part of our program, I am pleased to have with us our next speaker, who is more recently the vice chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. It is the local agency that regulates real estate development and plans transportation infrastructure and manages the park system here in Montgomery County. Prior to that point in time, she was on the front lines with CASA, an organization in this community who's done a lot of groundwork, not only in the Latino community, but also throughout all minority communities, working to close the gap in not only issues relative to housing, but also employment, a whole issue of poverty as an example, something they've been tackling for many, many years. And so she's been, again, one of the key people involved with that as well. And then she's a business owner, at least in the prior life. I don't know if she even has time anymore for that kind of thing, but at any rate, at one point in time, she was a business owner, very much engaged in the entrepreneurship opportunities that were existing here in Montgomery County. She was, by the way, folks, honored by Washington Magazine as one of the 40 under 40 change makers in Washington, D.C., and then named as a woman to watch. And also in 2021, recipient of a state citation by Governor Larry Hogan for community efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic. She now is one of our Montgomery County Council members. We're so very happy that she is in that role. And she is Councilwoman Natalie Fauny Gonzalez. Councilmember, welcome. Glad to have you here this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's awesome to be among friends who talk about housing, just because I love that topic. And before I even start, I wanted to say, since I heard Ana Tolentino mention, she was talking about the importance of educating young folks about buying their first home and investing in their future. I did that too in my 20s. I came to the States when I was 16 years old with my mom. We did not speak English. We were undocumented. We moved to Langley Park. That's like the mecca of the Latino community once you arrive to Maryland. I live like a block away from the Montgomery County border. And Although we were low income, my mom always said to me, and my mom just graduated high school. My father finished 3rd grade in elementary school. That's all education they had. But they always told me, work hard, be respectful, do it with honor and integrity, and invest in your future. So when we had an opportunity to buy a condo in Aspen Hill, I remember it was $70,000 back then. And so my mom and I bought it together. And that's how we started, building wealth for ourselves. You need to start small. You don't need to buy the $1 million home. You need to start small and then go after that. So that's how she and I made it. So I'm trying to teach my kids the same thing now that I have kids. So anyway, I had to say that since I heard Anna talking about it. Let me just say again, I'm Natalie, and what a pleasure to be here. I do have a quick PowerPoint, and since you all talked about the issue of policy and supply, maybe this is a good segue to talk about zoning changes that need to happen at the local level to really create more housing, and especially deeply affordable housing. I don't know how much in terms of how long I need to spend in explaining the master plan process. So I'm actually going to go very quickly, but feel free to just ask me questions and if I'm going too quickly, but I think it's important to have that as a base. I'm going to share my screen right now, just for a couple slides that I have. Can you see that? Everybody, can you see this PowerPoint? Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not able to see you, but anyway, I'm just gonna go. Okay, that's me. I'm the as it was mentioned, I'm newly elected. I was elected in December, and I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee for Montgomery County Council. I got to be chair of this committee because of my background in parking planning, and also as it was mentioned, I was a business owner. Once I got elected to the Montgomery County Council, I transferred my company to my employees just because there's no way I can have 2 full-time jobs plus kids. I'm a superwoman, but I'm also human. So anyway, and I'm also a member of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee that deals with housing issues. So those are my 2 committees. So as you all know, to have changes at the local level, we need to start with land use changes, right? So we have what's called master plans and sector plans. Master plans are basically the larger geographic area that establishes a framework for future growth. For example, the general plan for Montgomery County, we adopted that plan last year, is known as Thrive Montgomery 2050. I'm sure at least half of you is familiar with that plan. The previous one was established back like many years ago, many decades ago, before I was even born. So it was time to update it. And it's a vision on how the county should grow, okay? So then within the big master plan, we have sector plans. So the sector plan is basically a specific area within the larger master plan, and that sets goals for that area. So for example, we had the Bethesda downtown master plan, which had sector plan that I worked on. We had the Greater Laytonsville sector plan, which is the area near downtown Silver Spring. We have West Bard and so on. There's one that I want to highlight, and that's the Vera's Mill Corridor master plan. Why? Because I know my friend Alan is here, and we're going to talk about the amazing Randolph Road project that we had the groundbreaking a few weeks ago. But that project came live because we made changes within the sector plan of that area. So I'm just going to play this quick video. It's only 2 minutes just to get us on the mood here. Let's see if we can show it. Can you hear it? We're here today to make sure that people know that we're working on the Vera's Mill Corridor Master Plan. We want to make sure that we get people's opinion, especially the folks who are actually walking here every day to go to work, to take the kids to school. We want to make sure we engage with them and they know that we're here to listen. They can talk to us in any language they want. That's the beauty that we have in parking planning, is that we have people speaking different languages. So language shouldn't be a barrier for folks. ¿Cómo llegó aquí? ¿Caminó?
Caminando.
¿Por aquí? ¿Por dónde? Muéstrame.
Se me vino en bicicleta, está ahí nomás. Y
¿Bicicleta?
la dejé de un amigo por ahí por la gasolinera y yo me vine a pie.
¿Y por qué la dejó en la gasolinera donde un amigo y no la pudo dejar aquí?
Es que aquí a veces la molestan, va, como hay muchos delincuentes que se la llevan y no le quitan las ruedas, cualquier cosa, repuesto, lo quitan y la dejan ahí.
Y no hay sitio para dejar la bicicleta con candado, ¿verdad? No estoy viendo.
Ajá.
No hay, ¿verdad?
Aquí no, aquí para que no hay. Sí, sí, no
No
hay.
hay
Sí, sí, sí.
¿Cómo usted mejoraría esta área?
Bueno, tenemos que tener más cuidado por los pasados porque hay muchos accidentes de carros y me gustaría más, no sé, el semáforo va a ser más cuidadoso o alguien policía o algo que tengamos aquí porque aquí en esta área hay muchos accidentes de carros.
Exacto. ¿Y qué más le gustaría ver aquí para que sea más, para que usted esté más cómoda esperando el autobús? ¿Qué le gustaría ver?
Flores, muchas cosas que estuvieran bonito, más arreglado todo. Ajá, sí.
Hay muchos que pasan como que fueran en una autopista, pasan muy rápido y en veces pasan niños y algo peligroso.
Ya donde pusieron una luces para que la gente cruce,
En la Rosa Flor.
pero más allá,
Puente.
más acá, ahí con
En la-
más acá, ahí donde pusieron, donde están los bomberos,
los bomberos.
ya ahí, pero más abajito, en el que hay una esta de peatones, deberían poner una cámara, porque a veces toda la gente pasa con luz roja, los carros. Por eso hay atropellos, porque llegan y pasan, y otras personas tienen que estarle tocando de la bocina para que pare.
Okay. I hope you were able to read the translation if you don't speak Spanish. But basically, the way I saw it when I came to planning was that we have this culture where you were expecting people to come to hearings, and instead of us as a government agency going to the community and listen to their concerns so we can improve the neighborhoods, right? And if we wanted to create more density in certain areas or improve the transportation roads and infrastructure, we needed to hear from them. So that video that you saw, although it looked really simple, it was actually pretty transformative for the agency. Because again, I come from CASA, grassroots nonprofit, where we go to the people, to the community to organize. So I said, you know what, we cannot have the same people coming to park and planning, even to post higher densities when we know that we need more housing in the community. So let's do the opposite, let's go to them. So that video led us to win a national recognition by the American Planning Association on outreach. I mean, it was that powerful. We basically used the entire video and all the interviews, and we translated them into English so they could be part of the public record, saying that, low-income communities do want more housing. Low-income communities do want to have streets that are safe for people to walk by, roll, and drive. Low-income communities do want bike lanes, believe it or not. But we don't use our bikes because it's not safe in our neighborhoods. You usually see them in rich neighborhoods. You don't see it in low-income communities. So it helped to present that to folks who just didn't think that low-income communities wanted those awesome things too. So anyway, so that's one of the things that I was doing when I was in park and planning. And then building on the case of, I stopped sharing my screen, on putting the story of why we need more housing, but not just simply more housing, but more deeply affordable housing in Montgomery County. Let me share the screen again, because there were a couple of slides that I wanted you to see. We have limited housing supply, which creates constraints in the county. So the importance of creating more housing, especially near job centers and transit, is key. And then the reality that that 1 in 2 new households in Montgomery County are low income, people making less than $50,000 a year. So we need to create more housing for them as well, right? I have one more video, but I don't know how we are in timing, but this is basically about people talking about the housing shortage in Montgomery County. I'm not gonna play it just because I don't want to spend too much time playing videos. But basically, our communities are aware that are suffering. We have a housing crisis, and you cannot deal with it just one solution. So we had to talk about more housing supply, making sure that we modernize and upgrade our land use laws in different neighborhoods to upzone in certain areas so we can build more housing, especially near transit. And that's what we have been doing with different sector plans, but also taking advantage and ensuring that we're using government resources to create those deeply affordable housing. I know Alan Goldstein will probably talk about the Randolph Road project. I don't want to talk about it because I know you're gonna address it, but that Versmith Corridor Master Plan that I just showed is where this project is located. It used to be the recreational department years ago, and it's making sure that we're using county resources, especially county land, because that's what's the most expensive, to build more housing. Okay, another project coming up is the county executive, he just placed it in the CIP budget, which is the capital improvement budget that we have, is the Wheaton Arts and Culture Center. As you may know, Wheaton is an arts and entertainment district. So, and the community has been eager looking for a culture center here, and I live in Wheaton, by the way. And so finally, we're able to partner with a nonprofit, the Housing Opportunities, a nonprofit, to basically have the center plus affordable housing in the same location. So co-location. It's we approved it on Tuesday, and it's going to be one of those amazing projects that we're going to be proud of, because you have a use that is critical and it's part of the economic development angle, right? The arts, using the arts as an economic development tool, combined with people affordable housing in an urban center near transit. It's a win-win, and we're moving that forward as a county. I know I'm going very fast. Jim, do you have questions before I keep going?
I think we're good. You just a couple more minutes there.
Well, and I will end that part of the responsibility that we have as a government, besides making sure that we have that our land use policies are reflected with our values, meaning increasing more housing where we should. And believe me, I believe this group right here, to me, it might be like a very pro-housing group, but we have people in our community, in our society, who truly fight against land use changes, okay? And I have been a witness. I was in parking planning for 7 years, and there's some sector plans within Montgomery County. I'm not gonna mention the neighborhoods, so I don't get in trouble. But they are neighbors in our community who opposed having land use changes in the neighborhoods, because they believe that neighborhoods should stay and remain the way they are. And let me tell you, if we have a metro station, for example, in your neighborhood.
Everybody, it is Thursday, April 13th, and we are here at the Montgomery County Council. This is a public hearing.
Is that me?
On the FY24 capital budget, amendments to the FY23.
Is that me?
Councilman, I think it's you.
Yes, it is you, Councilor.
Council will begin.
Yeah. I'm not sure how we fix this technical difficulty here, because there is the interference coming in of our actual county council meeting.
Got it. It was a window that was open.
Very good. Okay,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So basically, we do have neighbors in our community who just refuse to see zoning changes. And if we really want to fight this housing crisis, we need to understand that housing supply is a problem, and we need to resolve it. And we also need to understand that the government needs to use every single tool available to create more deeply affordable housing, because the private sector cannot do it by themselves. It's impossible. And we need more funds for rental assistance. That's why I put together a proposal that is being backed up by 5 other council members. It's a package. It's called the tenant protection package, and it's basically, one is increasing rental assistance by $30 million, which doubles what we have done in Montgomery County. Right now, low-income communities are hurting. Even if you increase the rent by 1%, which could mean $20 or $50, people cannot afford that. Okay, wages are not increasing. That's one of the main problems that we have. So we need more money to ensure that our communities, low-income communities, can stay. So that $30 million rental assistance effort is being discussed as early as next week in the county council, and I already figured out how to get the money, and stay tuned on that. And I just need more support for people to say yes, more for rental assistance. So that's 1. 2, again, talking about the issue that Ana Tolentino was mentioning, home ownership. We need low-income communities, Latino, African Americans, communities to buy more homes, okay, to build wealth. So we're putting forward $4.5 million to assist first-time home buyers, especially those who are low income, and we're coming up with a language too. And again, that's coming, that conversation is going on through this budget as we speak. And those 2 items are coming in front of the PHP committee, the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, where I sit. Two very important items. Also, increasing funds for housing construction, for deeply affordable housing. Some different nonprofits that deal with housing, and I see several of them here, can have more funds and opportunities to build the housing that we need for those folks who are low income. Again, it's great to build more housing at every single income level, but also having a specific focus as a government to create more deeply affordable housing is crucial. And then the last thing I would say is that we also have and put forward a legislation. It's called an anti-rent gouging legislation. It's basically going after those really bad landlords out there who are increasing rents by 15-20%. That is not okay. And so I'm going after them. Right now, the way we presented the bill is modeled after a law that passed in the state of Oregon. It's an anti-rent gouging law. So I basically used the same model, and I got 5 of my colleagues to sign on to the bill. That bill is going to be discussed in front of the PHP committee. Again, everything comes to the housing committee. Our first session will be on June 15 after we approve the budget. So I hope everybody can please stay tuned. It's not perfect. I am one of those folks who, if you really believe in democracy, you need to understand that people have different views, and it's great when people come in with their own ideas, so we can amend the bill as best as, to make sure this is a strong bill. I am going to lower what we're saying. Like right now, I placed it as an 8% plus inflation as the cap. There is no cap for rental increases in Montgomery County. Okay, that's one of the problems. We don't have, like, if you're a landlord, you want to increase it by 20%, you are legally able to do it. And that's a problem because some folks have been abusing that. So I don't think there are that many, but there's some. So it's putting a cap. That's why it's called an anti-rent gouging bill. And so right now it says 8% plus local inflation. I am being honest here, I'm gonna lower that. That's just how I introduced the bill. So I'm gonna lower that a bit. Maybe even to say that it shouldn't the cap shouldn't even be more than 10%. But I'm talking to different folks, including nonprofits that deal with housing, like many of you here, and I look forward to your input. It doesn't have to be right now because we have time until June 15. But so you know that that's in my mind. And then having the Montgomery County Housing and Community Affairs Department, they will be the ones tasked to enforce this law. But again, it's a combination between rental assistance for people who are low income, home ownership funds to help first-time home buyers who are low income, and 3, the anti-rent gouging bill. And again, that will not solve the housing crisis. I mean, again, I'm gonna put on my hat as economic development chair. The other issue is making sure that we prepare our community to, to getting jobs that are higher paid, making sure our young folks, are prepared, career ready, and understand the importance of investing in the future. As Anna was saying, I keep picking on Anna just because she reminded me of myself when she was talking. So anyway, and that's it. I know I went forever, so I'm sorry.
That's quite all right, Councilmember Gonzalez, Fanny Gonzalez. Thank you so much for your input today. If you can, just hang with us. We're going to move along a little bit, though, if we can, and go right next to our next presenter. But I do want to make sure folks know that they can leave a question in the chat. I didn't say that earlier, and I apologize for that. I can leave a question in the chat, if you will, and I'll be more than glad to pass it on then to our moderator, who will try to address that if he or she can, as time might allow. So next up is, again, our next speaker is someone, we've got a lot of folks who are just on the front lines, and our next speaker is a realtor. He has been engaged as vice president in the Casita Coalition in San Diego, California, and has been working with that particular organization to, again, improve access to loaning opportunities. He has worked in the space not only as a lender, but also an educator as well. And so teaching folks, trying to give them and equip them with the skill sets that are necessary to be a part of the process. He has been named and recognized as a 2-time Realtor of the Year in 2017 and 2019, and was recognized by NAR as a Fair Housing Champion in 2022. He has served as commissioner for the city of San Diego for over 9 years, on the Citizens Equal Opportunity Commission, and serves on the San Diego Regional Airport Authority Board, and as president for the Sherman Heights Community Center. Rafael, take it away, my friend.
Thank you. So I'm in listening to, the different sessions and the different speakers. I was actually really excited to see how a lot of this all ties together. We talked about some big issues, everything from zoning to access to education. And a lot of the work that we've done at the Casita Coalition really goes to show where there's actually solutions. I think it's important before we go on to remind ourselves, this is a fair housing summit. And I think one of the most important parts surrounding fair housing is the concept of equity, not equality, but equity. How do you go and not just make it an equal playing field, but right some of the historic wrongs? One of the issues goes back to zoning. I think if you've ever read The Color of Law, you have read that zoning has some discriminatory roots. So every time you hear pushback against zoning, there may be some subtly veiled issues that are deeply rooted there that people may not even realize have a dark past. So I think that's important to recognize. And that's really behind a lot of the work we've done at the Casita Coalition with advocating in California for statewide gentle zoning reform, because we believe that the solution is in our backyards. And what we've done at the Casita Coalition with all the other stakeholders across the state, since 2016 until now, I've been advocating for small housing, particularly in the backyard, particularly accessory dwelling units. That has been a gentle way to resolve zoning statewide with by right ADUs. Not only do ADUs increase homeowner affordability, they also provide a naturally occurring affordable housing type for renters and family members, multi-generational housing, which is definitely embraced by diverse communities. And that really started a snowball in California. As mentioned, I'm in San Diego, and in San Diego, the city actually took those statewide reforms and ran with them by creating an affordable ADU bonus program, where not only do you get your by right ADU in the backyard, if you agree to make one of the additional bonus ADUs affordable, deed restricted, you get an additional bonus ADU. So just 2 years into that program, over 548 new units have been built, 300 of them affordable, deed restricted units without any public subsidy. Let me repeat that. Without a subsidy, all of these affordable, deed restricted units being created. So now we're talking about the supply, right? It's not hundreds and thousands of units on one property, but it's one unit at a time. And as we all know, if you stack small wins, you eventually make an impact. One of the things that a lot of our advocacy realize that there are some federal challenges when lending for ADUs. We had lenders on the panel earlier, and we've been advocating for that. And I'm super excited to have just heard yesterday, the HUD and FHA announced that they will now be looking at ways to be able to use the FHA renovation program, the 203K, to finance the construction of accessory dwelling units. And a huge game changer with that is that they're going to be looking at allowing 50% of the future rental income of the yet unbuilt unit as qualifying income. That's for diverse communities, for housing affordability, for wealth creation, for all the things we talked about today. I'm so excited. This has been a long time coming. We've been fighting for it, and to just finally see that domino tip over. It's not a memo yet. It's in draft form, but it's coming, and they're looking for feedback, and we're excited. So that's just a snapshot of the work we've been doing. We talked about how everybody wants a single family home, but they need to start with a condo. Some exciting stuff that's still going through the legislative process in California, but we're definitely pushing for it, is now the next step of allowing accessory dwelling units that have been built over the last 6, 7, 8 years. If this bill passes, we're hoping that they'll be able to be sold now as condos, so that it's a happy medium solution where it's not just an apartment. It feels like a single family home, but it's priced like a condo, and really creates that pipeline of inventory that entry-level diverse buyers need and lack across the country. So that's just a snapshot of the work we're doing, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator, who's going to take us into the next panel. Norena Limon leads Mariposa Strategies. She's an expert in housing finance, homeownership, land use, housing supply, and economic mobility. She's a fellow at the Turner Center at UC Berkeley, where she received her bachelor's degree. She has a master's from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And she's just a force in the housing space, former senior vice president of public policy at the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. She's worked for CFPB. She's done work in the White House and in Congress, and just a force in the housing space. So I just want to welcome Norena Limon.
Thank you so much, Rafael. You are a partner in crime of mine. So I appreciate your words, as you are a force yourself, my friend. And we need all the forces that we can get, and we need to link arms together around the country in order to really make a difference on this issue that we're talking about when it comes to fair housing, when it comes to addressing our housing supply crisis, our housing affordability crisis. And you see faces, I too am in California. We are having a conversation about Maryland, but in reality, this is a national issue where we are all facing, city by city, county by county, state by state. We are all facing similar issues. We have, like Rafael said, deep-rooted histories when it comes to zoning in this country. So we have major resistance to change. And there is losses that people endure or perceive that they endure when a neighborhood changes. right? And then there is, on the other side, there's communities of color who have been impacted historically by revitalization efforts. So anything so there is mistrust on both sides. At the same time that we all realize that we need change in order to address our very growing and burgeoning housing crisis. So this is why it is more important than ever that we all link arms as housers around the country, so that we can all learn from one another. We can learn about the strategies. We can learn about the messaging that works. We can learn about, like Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez talked about, the community engagement that is necessary in order to move these changes along and address some of these deep-rooted and racist zoning policies that are stopping us from progress. This is why, Rafael spoke about some of the work that we're doing at the Casita Coalition. That is one of the things that we really want to make sure that we do, is that we are all sharing our best practices. We're all sharing, we're all talking to each other. We become best friends, whether you're in Maryland, you're in San Diego, you're in Detroit, you are in somewhere in Ohio. We all need to talk to each other and learn from one another. And yes, there is a lot of NIMBYism that we are all fighting against. And that is the unspoken barrier that we're dealing with. But at the same time, there's also the barriers within our own housing community. What happens is a lot of times that we become siloed in our own specific sector of the housing industry, when in reality, housing happens on a spectrum. There is a domino effect to a housing supply crisis. So if we are not building, what the most underbuilt housing unit right now is affordable homeownership or entry-level homeownership. There are no subsidies, really. There are very little subsidies in order to build that entry-level homeownership housing. And if we don't do that, that means that people are staying as renters for longer. And that means that those individuals that are renting are priced out and need affordable housing. And so people that are, more people are in affordable housing than there is supply, then more people are pushed into experiencing homelessness. So it is a continuum. Housing is a continuum. Addressing only one sector impacts the entire journey along the way. So it's so important that we're all coordinating and we all don't see housing as a silo. This is something that we need to address across the board in order to ensure that our individuals and our communities are housed, and our communities have the ability to have social mobility and are able to build wealth by becoming homeowners. So everything that we've been talking today. So I'm excited to introduce the panel. So we're going to be discussing some of the various models, some of the various approaches that folks have taken to addressing some of our housing affordability issues. So with that said, I'm going to have a few folks present, and then we're going to come back and have a conversation and talk about best practices, because that's exactly what we're here to do. So with that said, I want to introduce Sarah Redinger, who is the Vice President of Community Development at Habitat for Humanity. Sarah oversees the advocacy, homeowner services and lending, real estate acquisition, project management, home preservation, and strategic partnerships for Habitat. Under her leadership, the housing development pipeline has grown from a few dozen projects to over 120 units, with a projected budgets of over $35 million. She's also grown the home preservation programs from about 30 projects a year to over 100, with a budget of over $2.5 million annually. Most recently, she launched the Repair and Accessibility Modification Program and a veteran repair program to help residents remain safely in their homes and ensure their ability to transfer wealth to the next generation. Sarah received her bachelor's degree in Russian and French, so we'll have a sideline on that afterward, and her master's in both marketing and business administration at the University of Rochester Simon School of Business. Sarah, if you can please join us on stage, we'd love to hear your presentation. The virtual stage.
Thank you so much. And also, Alan Goldstein is going to be part of this presentation as well. So I want to make sure I recognize that. He'll be speaking in just a minute. Give me just a second. I'll share my screen. So again, thank you for that introduction, and I'm so excited to be here as part of this really important conversation. Again, Alan and I wanted to just sort of briefly introduce our organizations to sort of inform the discussion around a project we're working on collaboratively that Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez mentioned earlier on Randolph Road in Silver Spring. So to kick us off, Habitat for Humanity International is our parent nonprofit organization. They were founded in 1976 in rural Georgia on a farm called Koinonia Farm. And I want to point this out because, again, we are talking about fair housing. Koinonia Farm was and still is a community where people of various races lived together, worked together, ate together, prayed together. Everybody lived in the same type of housing. Everyone was paid the same wage. And you can imagine in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this really was radical inclusivity. And so it was on this farm that Habitat for Humanity was formed and developed. And this is really where our vision of a world where every single person has a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home. This is where our vision came from, and that's the vision that we continue to fight for today. And we live our mission by trying to provide equitable access to affordable home ownership so that families of lower income and families of color that are traditionally locked out of the market are able to build wealth. And I really appreciate that one of the panelists earlier mentioned that the benefits of homeownership really exceed wealth, right? There's typically higher levels of education, higher levels of savings and stability, better health outcomes, and so many additional benefits that come with homeownership as well. And now we are the largest nonprofit builder in the world. We build in about 70 countries, and we've served almost 40 million people across the globe. And we do our work through local affiliates. So I'm with the Metro Maryland affiliate. We've been around now for 41 years in Montgomery County. And we're sort of unique because we are a builder. We actually have, home building licenses as well as home improvement contractor licenses. And then we're also a lender, so we can make sure that the products we build really are affordable. And again, I want to stop here for a minute. Again, as this is a fair housing summit, being a lender is incredibly important, right? Because that means we get to choose how we review credit, what we look at. We get to choose kind of how we work with gig workers and making sure that we're providing flexible mortgages for people with different types of income. And so the fact that we are a lender really allows us that flexibility as we look at getting lower income families into home ownership. And we do our work through a number of different programs. We build new construction, so we can build single family homes, townhomes, condos. We also rehab vacant distressed properties, and both of those programs are really tailored to helping folks get into home ownership and purchase their homes. We also have extensive home preservation programs as well, recognizing that we are not going to build our way out of the affordability crisis that we have. So it's equally as important to make sure that folks who already own their homes but maybe struggle to maintain them and are at risk of losing them are able to remain in them safely. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan to jump into AHC and then kick off the discussion on the Randolph Road project.
Sarah, Alan, if you permit me, I'd love to introduce you. Does that work? So we can talk about all the amazing work that you do.
I might blush while you do, but that would be lovely. Thank you.
Wonderful. So first of all, Alan Goldstein is the Vice President of Real Estate and Affordable Housing Corporation. Alan leads the team of development managers responsible for the acquisition, financing, and renovation of new construction of multifamily residential communities throughout the greater Washington area. He specializes in crafting innovative partnerships that leverage private sector capital to create and preserve affordable housing. Alan previously worked on Wall Street as an investment banker, and he served for many years on the board of directors of MACOM, might have mispronounced that, which is formerly the Jewish Foundation for Group Homes, where he co-chaired the Housing Strategies Task Force. He earned a master's degree in public policy at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan. So take it away, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm also a proud resident and son of Montgomery County. So as passionate as I am about the issue, it's even more exciting to be involved, as we'll talk about here, as the council member mentioned, our first New Construction Initiative in Montgomery County. So AHC is structured as a not-for-profit business. We've been for 45 years creating affordable and workforce housing. We acquire and construct housing. And with what we currently have in our active development pipeline under construction, we are approaching almost 9,000 homes, providing dignified, comfortable, dependably affordable housing to almost 20,000 people throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. Maybe we could look to the next slide while I'm continuing to speak. Thank you. So our presence is throughout the Mid-Atlantic region and up into Baltimore. And what's special about what we do is that not only are we providing the affordable housing, but we spend equal time, effort, and investment in providing service-enriched housing so that we're providing supports to help our residents navigate the many challenges of modern society and all the associated expenses. As you can see here on our slide, we have robust programming at many of our communities where our very talented and energetic youthful resident services staff is out there with the residents, helping them deal with, as you see here, our 4 cornerstone pillars of our resident services team. We are helping individuals become the first in their family to go to college. We are teaching people the financial literacy skills that tie into many of the comments that we heard before about the importance of understanding finances in the housing space. So let me stop there. And as we were tasked, turn to this Randolph Road development. Sarah, do you want me to kick off here?
Please do. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, the best part about this was working with Habitat. Sarah has been just the world's most fabulous and dependable and passionate partner, and the entire team from Habitat, coupled with the folks that I'm so fortunate to work with here at AHC in many divisions, all came together. And what we'll be talking about for the next couple of minutes is the embodiment of all of the types of policy considerations that so many others this morning and this afternoon have talked about. The county, through the County Executive's Office, the Department of General Services, identified a number of opportunities to utilize county land for affordable housing. They issued an RFP, I think it was back in, there it is, in 2019, to take this parcel, which many of you may be familiar with. It's at the intersection of Randolph and Viersville Road in Lower Montgomery County. It's a desirable place in terms of access to transit and education and employment. That site, it's kind of hard to see from a distance here, but it's actually a full 6 acres, which is one of the largest undeveloped sites available in the county. What we did is we sought to put together a response to not just the affordable housing challenge, but a number of the significant challenges that individuals of lower incomes in our community face. So we put together a proposal that combined not just affordable housing, but large units, which are extremely hard to come by. Deep affordability at levels rarely seen, and I can get into some more detail there, and combined them with a transit-oriented location at the intersection of 2 pending bus rapid transit lines, one running east-west on Randolph and north-south on Veers Mill. And we also incorporated a childcare facility. So let's go to the next slide, please. If you could just flip back for a second. If folks can orient themselves, this grassy parcel coupled with asphalt and sort of an old outdated round building in the middle is going to become, if we can flip again, this beautiful building that utilizes multiple building typologies to create a campus-like integrated community that, as Sarah alluded to, is going to combine deeply affordable rental apartments with home ownership opportunities. We'll have family-sized units, as you can see sort of in the center running between the smaller buildings there. We're going to have a beautiful park divided into different spaces for active and passive recreation and different age groups and interests. In the larger building, We'll have a childcare facility there, of almost 3,000 square feet that could serve up to 50 children, so that individuals in their affordable housing with access to transit have an affordable place to provide childcare for their offspring. In addition, we won a grant recently, I'm thrilled to say. We're going to be tapping into some sort of a cable that runs underneath the adjacent street so that we can utilize what's called MocoNet and provide low-cost broadband access to our residents, essentially giving them access to the internet at fast speeds and low costs, dealing with that question of digital equity as we all start to work in a world that's increasingly wired. In keeping with many of the environmental goals of the property, it's a fully electric site. All right, why don't we flip the page? To set the context, and I looked through the attendee list, we've got some planners on the call here. I would welcome any questions, but in simple terms, the red, the orange, and the burnt orange are the rental portion of the community. And then, as Sarah will go into in more detail in a moment, while the buildings are identical, the rose pink buildings that we saw in the prior picture are legally structured and owned separately, and those will be sold off as deeply affordable condominiums. The yellow blocks at the bottom of the page will be single-family homes. Again, we'll hear more about from Sarah, that essentially result in a scaling down of the community from the larger buildings being at the arterials, the major roads, and then trending down to have an appropriate relationship with the adjacent single-family neighborhood. Okay, the next. And this is where it gets exciting. We will be doing an unbelievable number and depth of affordable units here. We will have 85 3- and 4-bedroom units, which will significantly increase the quantity of that size family units across the entirety of the county. And to the best of our knowledge, and Natalie, I've talked with most of the planning staff that works with housing, we believe these will be the only committed affordable 4-bedroom units in the county. So super exciting on so many different dimensions. And what I wanted to do for folks that don't do this on a daily basis is take some of these numbers on the grid and turn them into what they really mean. If we look at the upper left corner, a 30% area median income rental apartment is going to rent, after subtracting for an assumed utility allowance, for $691. This is going to allow our service professionals, our lower paid employees, our techs, all of the individuals that we interact with throughout our days to remain living at this beautiful community. The 2 bedrooms will be less than $1,000 at, oh, let me follow my numbers here. Yes, 2 bedrooms, one down. Yes, 30%, they'll start at $800. And then at the different income levels, they'll tier up slightly. But even when we get to our 60% AMI rentals, we will still be talking about rents that are 30, 40, and 50% below the applicable submarket rents. So perhaps, oh, let's turn one more page. It was an exciting time to do a deal like this. Sarah and I got to know one another and our boards of directors and our lenders and investors and all the other many stakeholders in this transaction very well as we navigated the impacts of the pandemic and the resulting impacts in the interest rate market and the construction market. While many of us were reading in the newspapers about the cost of this and that going up and what have you, we were experiencing it in revised bids increasingly higher and higher as we rushed to get to a closing process. And fortunately, with the planning staff working with us, the housing staff working with us, the county executive's office fully in support of this initiative, not only did we get it closed in November, but we were also very fortunate that after making an initial very significant commitment of almost $14 million to the community, that the county stuck with us right through to the end. And by the time we closed on the transaction, there was actually an investment from the county of nearly $24 million. The state of Maryland came in with an additional $5 million, and we cobbled together other sources of debt and equity to come up with the full $80 million cost of just the rental initiative. I think we have that there. So again, these are things I'm covering quickly, and I'd be glad to take questions on any and all of this when we get to that point. I think with that, Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, so really quickly on the ownership side, on the slide, I just want to point out the single family homes. Whenever we can, we build universal design homes. And the idea of this really is to accommodate folks of all abilities and at all stages of life in the home. So there are no steps on the exterior, there are no steps on the interior. We build in wider doorways, wider hallways, make sure there's a bathroom that has a tub as well as a bathroom that has a walk-in shower. So really just designing homes so that they can accommodate household members of all abilities and at all stages of life. So we're really excited to build universal design single family homes on this site as well. And so I know this came up earlier, but home ownership is typically very difficult to finance. There are not as many financing tools out there. There is a very high subsidy per unit. Typically, when we're building one-off units, we're subsidizing the home by about $200,000 per unit. That is incredibly difficult to do, and it is incredibly difficult to do at scale. And so one of the reasons this project worked for Habitat was because of the co-location with rental. Rental has access to different financing sources that we do not. And so we were both able to bring different financing tools to the table, and really building on economies of scale. We're driving down the subsidy per unit for Habitat, which was really helpful. I know this has come up in the chat as well. So I wanted to mention the condo fees. Typically, that's a barrier for a lot of folks moving into condo units, and those can be pretty significant. Again, by co-locating a significant amount of rental units with homeownership units, we're actually able to share property management costs across over 190 units rather than 24 condos. So again, helping to drive down those condo fees. Habitat will also do significant training with the homeowners. We'll create the condo association. We will actually fund the reserve fund, and we will sit as an advisory committee with the homeowners association in perpetuity to make sure that everything is run smoothly and there are plenty of reserves. And so really this co-location piece is, I think, incredibly important and incredibly replicable. So how do we finance the ownership side? Our piece was nearly $10 million. And typically what we'll do is get a construction loan, and we will pay that off after we underwrite the mortgages. We can sell them, we can assign them to pay off the construction loan. We also did a capital campaign and raised over $1.5 million from private donors over a year period who believe in affordable housing and want to see this project happen in the community. We worked with our state delegates to get a legislative bond initiative. And then I wanted to mention too, the Department of Housing sort of flexibility in working with us. There are a lot of homeownership funding sources that are not available until after you own the property, because there's a very short window of time between when you receive the funding and when you have to start selling the homes. And so DHCA was able to provide a $2 million loan to us to get us to closing, and that loan can actually front future fundraising dollars. So now that we own the property, we're working on Federal Home Loan Bank applications. Habitat for Humanity affiliates have also sort of pioneered going after new markets tax credits for home ownership. It's not a traditional use, but we've been very successful at doing that across the nation. And then we'll have access to additional grants and in-kind donations as well. And so we've identified a lot more sources than we need to make sure that enough of them come through to make this project a reality. And like Alan mentioned, I wanted to talk about kind of what deeply affordable units actually means on the homeownership side. So these are estimated household income ranges according to AMI level. And I will say that, you know, again, Habitat as a lender, we are working with clients that folks typically think of as a little bit more risky. We have had one default in 41 years. You can provide homeownership loans to folks at lower incomes if you do it right and you make sure that those payments are affordable. And so we ensure that all of our buyers don't pay more than 30% of their income on housing. For us, that's the mortgage, that's the condo fees, that's the homeowner's insurance, and that's the property taxes. And the way that we make that affordable is by basically subsidizing the sales price down to a level that makes everything else fall within that 30% range. And Habitat is also unique in that we underwrite 0% interest mortgages. over 30 years, and we only require a 1% down payment. So it's incredibly affordable for folks to get into ownership with Habitat. And then that's why we don't calculate interest or private mortgage interest in that affordability calculation. And the last thing I'll mention before kind of we finish the presentation is that Habitat also has mechanisms in place to prevent flipping. We know there's a huge subsidy that's going into every home, so we have right of first refusal on all of our homes. We have second mortgages that only get paid back upon sale if folks sell early, to make sure that homes can't be flipped and that equity then kind of walked away with immediately. And we also, in some cases, have equity sharing as well. So a lot of mechanisms to make sure that it's affordable for Habitat to repurchase a home and keep it affordable, but also mechanisms that allow the buyers to build wealth and earn equity themselves. So with that, I will stop and we can move on to the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I am, my mind is blown, by the way, by this presentation. And this is what this is about. I am ready to take this model to folks that I'm speaking to, not only in California, but all over the country. One of the things that, kind of going back to what I said earlier, this product is the most underdeveloped product in the country. And that's because there aren't a lot of funding sources to build these homes. So seeing how you all put money together, one of the things that I am perplexed by, because I've been told that you cannot do ownership and rental in the same unit. How did you go around that loophole, or what are some of the lessons that you can give to folks all over the country that are working to do something similar?
Alan, do you want to kick that off from the LIHTC side?
Oh, sure. So the way that I like to say it is that if the business people can think of it, the legal people can make it happen.
I like that.
So there are, I'll give two examples. In this example, we have very clearly distinct buildings that are utilized for those different uses, home ownership and rental.
Yeah.
Because of that, we were able to do legal subdivision lines that you didn't see in our pretty pictures, so that the banks were able to lay claim on distinct pieces of collateral, and we were able to pledge that collateral and the revenue from the apartments and the sales proceeds from the homes to the respective lenders and investors that we talked about in each of our presentations briefly. Very clear, very separate, very distinct. The synergies come in two ways. Habitat benefited, as Sarah alluded to, from all of the planning and the zoning and the work and the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that went into getting the approval for this, but was only obligated, based on, I think it was square footage of land, to pay about 13% of those costs. The synergies through co-location were amazing. And then going forward, we're going to have operational synergies through things as simple as lawn mowing, snow removal, trash pickup, et cetera, where each entity exists separately, but they work together synergistically to keep operating expenses low. The other example that's out there, and we don't have time for it today, but there are ways to use the same legal concepts to create distinct condominiums within a single structure. We've done this in DC. So you can essentially do the same thing on a single land parcel. And then we're really getting into the weeds.
We need a playbook on this, because I have heard this over and over again, that this can't be done. So figuring out how do we replicate that is going to be a game changer, I think, nationally.
Sarah and I do a good road show. We can video in from anywhere to anywhere. I would be glad to help and advise others. It is a model we'd love to see replicated.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, we have another distinguished guest that I want to introduce, but I want to highlight some of our partners at the Mission Economic Development Agency are doing a big affordable homeownership construction in the middle of San Francisco, which is the most unaffordable market in the country. They've been working with the city, but also working with the teachers union, and it's only going to be for educators, which is a very interesting model, definitely a very expensive per unit model. So understanding kind of how to how to layer all of these funding sources, I think, is critical. That is the question that we are all asking. So congratulations on this project. And like I said, I think we need to write the playbook, and that's what we got to do, city by city, write these playbooks about what folks are doing that's working. So thank you for all of your efforts. I do want to introduce real quick, we have County Executive Mark Elrick, who was elected to serve as Montgomery County's 7th county executive in 2018 after serving 3 terms on the Montgomery County Council at large, where he was a member from 2006 to 2018. He has provided record funding for affordable housing, initiated the Housing Opportunity Fund to give affordable housing developers access to fast, flexible funding to respond to unplanned opportunities and to increase affordable housing supply. So with that said, I am going to introduce him, and I would love to hear your thoughts and share your perspective. Can't hear you.
Better?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your framing of this as something you want to share with other people. I first saw this condominium regime on a commercial project when I was on the council. And I started asking questions is why can't I do this for residential? I got the same nonsense answers you got. And the fact was you could condominiumize things pretty much any way you want to. And it was kind of a willful decision, not a law-driven decision. So I'm thrilled about this. And this is something that we're thinking about a lot because we want to build more units. And it's good not to be in this kind of draconian choice of having to build an entire building as rental or an entire building as ownership, or acquire a building and have to make that decision with existing tenants. I'm very interested in looking at acquisitions and the ability to condominiumize a building in a way that people can move into ownership when they're ready, and rental units can be preserved for people who aren't ready, and they have the option to let us trigger, additional condominiums when they're ready to do that. And so it's kind of exciting to see, how this has played out. And when we did this project, we solicited, and we were pointed about what we solicited. You'll notice everything in this project's affordable. That's not normally the way things get done. And our hole is too deep to continue to settle for 15% of a project or 30% of a project or 20% of a project. We really have a serious problem to address. I will, of course, upset my staff by using a couple of statistics, but Sarah had an interesting chart on that was up earlier. And I just want to, tell people, like in Montgomery County right now, there are like 50,000 households paying half or more of their income on housing who are earning less than $50,000, and about 30,000 of those households are around 30% of AMI. The scary part is that the projections for future growth in the county called for 40,000 households by 2030. Of those households, they say only 10% of the 10,000 of them, 25%, would be for market housing. The other 75% have to be affordable to people between 75 and 30% of AMI. And of those, half of them had to be below 50% of AMI. So if that's the future, you're never going to get there building 15% or 20% of your new housing. And you certainly don't provide any relief for people who already live here. So we're looking at this complicated mix of who lives here and how do you satisfy the needs that exist there? How do you satisfy the needs for people moving into the county? We'll be proposing, Montgomery County's got this famous program called the MPDU program. Don't anybody on this call say this is a great program. It's highly overrated. And it was a good program in the 1970s. And it was targeted, and this was their words, not mine, for teachers, firefighters, and policemen. That's our signature affordable housing program. Of course, in 1970, the county was largely working class, middle class, and didn't have a lot of low income folks. You fast forward to Montgomery County today, a teacher can't afford this, a starting teacher can't afford an MPDU. That's our program. After 40 years almost 50 years of a program, I have 6,700 units to show for it. Yeah, it's a joke. And so we're going to be submitting a plan that, we're going to call it the Complete Communities Act or something like that, but basically to require that when the planning board plans an area, they have to plan for everybody. When the planning board planned for Bethesda, they actually zoned out existing affordable housing to be replaced by more expensive housing. Did not zone for at least a one replacement of what already exists, let alone additional units for growth. So we're gonna, it doesn't make sense to plan communities and not plan for everybody. If I want to plan segregated, wealthy communities, I ought to just say that's what I'm doing, not pretend that's what I'm not doing. And then we're going to require a higher percentage mix of units, going down to 30% of AMI, but also going up to about 100% of AMI, because as you will find in Montgomery County, a lot of folks at 100%, and Bethesda is another good example, at 100% of AMI, a lot of these people cannot find affordable housing. They make too much money to qualify for an MPDU. They make too little money to get into the market. So these folks are stranded. So we have to figure out ways to serve a broader range of residents. We just had a developer, they're doing 2 projects right off of Wisconsin Avenue. And they asked for a waiver from the MPDU program and just give us money. And it was a fairly small check. And this time we said no. We did 2 of them, and when I found out, I said I'm not doing these anymore. And they came back and they did what was meant by the program. They reduced the price of the units and reduced the condo fees and spread those costs over the market units in the project. And they are going to be able to deliver to us affordable condo ownership units in the heart of Bethesda at prices that were intended by the MPDU program. So I'm excited about that. But, one thing I've found is you have to ask for what you want. You can't go to a table and say, what will you give me? You have to start a conversation. That's what we did on this project. We said, this is what we want: high levels of affordability and ownership. And I'm sure if I hadn't asked for it, I would have gotten a traditional project with a bunch of market and then some affordable units, and there'd be no ownership. And it would be, well, great, this is a great victory. This project is a great victory. This project's a model for the kind of work we should be doing. And we have to learn a little bit of humility. And it was great to say that you were praised for what you did 40 years ago. You ought to have enough humility to realize the thing you did 40 years ago doesn't work anymore. And give it up and step toward the light, as somebody would say, and figure out how you actually deal with the problems that face the residents of Montgomery County today. So we're being very aggressive about it. We've got a really good relationship with HOC, which the county hasn't had with HOC for a long time. Both of us are looking together between some things they can do that we can't and things we can do that they can't, to put together a more effective program to actually vastly increase the amount of money that's available for affordable housing. Because we're never, even if I put in $140 million a year for now until almost eternity, it's not enough to correct the direction we're going in. So we need more money. And the last thing I'll say, I'm a big believer in ownership, but also for a selfish reason for the county. If my money gets tied up in a long-term rental and I have to be present in that deal in order to make the numbers work, that money's gone out of the county budget and it's not usable for somebody else. When we do a housing project, we just did a ROFR and we put a ton of money into that ROFR. A year later, when that mortgage was taken out, the county got its money back. If we do ownership, when the units convert to ownership and mortgages replace, the temporary funding to get us from transition to an ownership point, then the money can go back into the housing fund and go right back out in the community. So we want to try to get our housing funds increasingly to act like rotating funds, where we can take the money and continue to recycle it, use it, finance it, help people go through a transition. Then the money we get back, use it, cycle it, help people through a transition, and make much better use of our money over a longer period of time. So that's kind of my short shtick on what this is. But Alan and Sarah, you guys have been great partners on this project. It took a lot of patience from everybody. We continue to work I didn't mention this. We've got 18 properties right now out on the block. We were already moving forward with some of the people who bid on those properties. These are all have to be highly affordable developments. These are county parking lots that we're going to do. Now, next we'll be looking at county garages and what can be done on top of our garages. So that's an exciting thing that we're looking at. And, we're looking for more partnerships with people, and we're looking at innovative construction. I mean, the problem for Alan, Sarah, and everybody is when you're getting up to $300 or $400 a square foot, the job of making something affordable is intense. And if you're trying to build a high-rise building and you think you're going to get much affordability when you're plunking down 600 a square foot, and if the government subsidizes it, which we do to some extent, but I am buying fewer units for the same dollars. This is why I'm more of a fan of middle-sized housing, where I can stay in stick construction and keep my housing costs down to a more reasonable level, so the depths of subsidy is less than it is, so I can subsidize more units at less money rather than fewer units at more money. So there are things that we're looking at to try to make ourselves more effective in actually creating housing. So that's where I am. I'm excited that we're in this situation. We can do this stuff now. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be elected county executive, was to be able to kind of turn the ship around. And this project was kind of like, I'd say, the cornerstone or the guidepost by which everything else will get driven. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am about to post about this on my LinkedIn because I want to brag about it to everyone so we can all learn from one another. I know that we have a couple more minutes left. I do want to bring in Rafael back into the conversation. We've been talking about affordable housing developments on home ownership and those models and some of the innovative ways to do that. I do want to bring back a conversation that you mentioned earlier during your presentation, Rafael, about market solutions. So you mentioned ADUs that are being sold as condos in places like Austin. I was told by an ADU developer that if someone builds two duplexes, it costs about $850,000 to build two duplexes, 2-bedroom apartments. So that if you divide that in 4, that's affordable home ownership at a market rate. How is that possible? How would that work? So can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, going back to the conversation of ADUs, we've seen in markets like Seattle where they're allowing ADUs to be sold separately as a condo. They're selling for 60% of what the market rate is on a regular entry-level home, which, going back to the idea of equity, that gives you a more affordable price point into neighborhoods the families would otherwise be priced out of, and everything that comes with that. Also talking about the upcoming potential changes over at FHA with the 203K loan. I mean, even going on the high side in California at a $200,000 ADU construction, the finance cost of that, even with the high rates, you're looking at $1,200 a month in mortgage. Out in the California market, that would rent for $2,400, meaning the other $1,200 after the mortgage increases paid would go towards the management, the maintenance, and everything else that's left is wealth building, it's affordability, it's college savings, it's all the things that when somebody is maxed out on their home ownership mortgage that they don't have access to. And that, once again, that provides another rental unit in the market. So, I mean, I think that ADUs and all the different creative ways that they're being adapted across the country goes back to solving big problems in one small postage stamp at a time. And I think that it's because it may be just one project, but for that one family, it makes all the difference, right? And then you multiply that across the country, and now you've actually made a huge impact. As I mentioned, in very, very, very small increments, but also in an affordable way that isn't costing as much as it costs to build, as was mentioned earlier, a high-rise dorm without the subsidies, right? That's, I think, another huge part is these are being done without subsidies. They are being expedited and facilitated through a fast track government process in California, but without the subsidy. So definitely just an innovative way that we've seen that happen.
So to sum all of this up, when innovative minds come together, they do make magic happen when they work across various sectors, from the public to the private sector to nonprofits, working together to solve this issue. We can do it, but we have to be in communication with one another so we can learn how to do these. And this is a council member talked about how our housing crisis, there is not one approach to solve it. We need to try everything. And then we probably are going to, almost get there. So there is, our crisis has burgeoned. And so we need to think outside the box every day to solve this crisis. So thank you so much to Commissioner Becerra for having us all on. And thank you for the innovative approaches that all of you shared. And I'm gonna pass it back to Jim.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Nadia, and all of you who participated in this great panel. Sarah, Anna, Raphael, and of course, our own County Executive Mark Elrich and Councilmember Natalie Fani Gonzalez. Great segment. Really appreciate that. That was looking at this issue of, now we've got some ideas about how housing occurs. Now let's build it. Let's build it and make it available then to begin to kind of address that supply theme that sort of has been throughout our conversation today. We've got to have more housing, got to have more housing, got to have more supply. So again, thank you all very much for that. Commissioner Becerra, are you standing by with a comment?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, please, sir.
Oh, first of all, thank you. I was blown away by both presentations, both sessions. Particularly the fact that the obstacles, the headwinds were more than adequately addressed. What I would like to emphasize, Jim, is that the county executive spoke about this. Several panelists talk about this. There is room for both rental and home ownership. There's a need and a market demand for both at all levels of income. We mentioned the fact that the county executive talked about folks at the AMI of 100%, not being able to afford housing. But let me just give you some figures that show that are positive factors going forward to meet all these needs. Just in terms of income, that translates into market demand. In Montgomery County, nearly 2 out of every 5 Black households earn an annual income of $100,000 or more. And similarly, more than 2 out of 5 Hispanic households earn an annual income of $100,000. And more than 1 in 5 Hispanic households earn an annual income of $150,000 or more. And as the affordable housing project along the Randolph Road corridor demonstrates, it is possible also to address the homeownership needs of both low and moderate income families. So it can happen. As Jim Parrott, who was counselor to President Obama, previously noted, there is good data on the number of people that are ready to become homeowners, that are mortgage ready and nearly mortgage ready. So as long as they have good credit scores and good incomes that qualified, they can make it. Having said that, thank you, everyone, for making an excellent and outstanding presentation. This should serve as a model moving forward to what can be done in other parts of the country. That is, and shows that Montgomery County is at the helm of being able to get things done in housing. Thank you.
So much. Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate that. County Executive, if you stick with us, you have a closing word.
My closing words. Look, this is some of the most important work that we're going to be doing. And it is difficult to talk about racial equity and the importance of engaging diverse communities if your housing programs don't address diverse communities. And you can't afford to be distracted by things that aren't actually going to produce results. And it troubles me sometimes when people get tied up in how many single family lots can I convert. Meanwhile, the county controls zoning over property that could yield tens and tens of thousands of units. And the decisions we make will decide whether those units are affordable in the future or remain to be incredibly unaffordable. And so, I think we've got to, put a lot of effort into the things we control and have the power to, dictate the future of. And, we have to work with the private sector, but this is the lane that government is allowed to exercise, and we should exercise it better than we've exercised it in the past. I know that, some of the projects that are exciting in Montgomery County, we didn't talk about the project at the Goshen Church, where we're going to restore an historic Black community and build over 500 households there. The county right now is working on acquiring an enormous number of units in downtown Silver Spring that were built in the plan under a plan envisioned by Eleanor Roosevelt in the late 40s. We're looking at opportunities to preserve as much housing as we can, because once it's gone, it is cheaper to buy and renovate than it is to build new. So we're trying to preserve as much as we can. And we're focused on building opportunities so that we can provide a range of support for various incomes and focus primarily on how much affordability we can get out of these projects rather than the gross number of units. Because I can produce a lot of units, but if they're not affordable to the people who are in the market, a lot of those will sit empty, they'll sit unbuilt, and we'll be waiting. I don't think most people don't realize the county has almost 40,000 approved units in a pipeline. All a builder has to do is go pull a permit. They're not being built. So if there's a demand, you would think they'd be being built. And the reason they're not, and Park and Planning once asked the developers this question, and the developer's answer was rents aren't high enough. So, and if rents aren't high enough, that means incomes aren't high enough. Now, of course, I could address this problem by raising minimum wage to $30. There would be other problems that would flow from that, but you get the complexity of the problem. I mean, frankly, at the end of the day, affordable housing starts as a wage problem. And the better we address wage equity in society, the smaller the affordable housing gap is. So I think that, we've got to think of this holistically. We've got to think about what our targets are, but we have to put money up too. And that's one of the things we've done, is put serious money into this. We're going to keep doing that. So thank you. Thank everybody here, because I know is all committed to the same thing, outcomes that'll make this place more just, more equitable, and more inclusive.
Thank you so much, County Executive, and to our audience today, thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. This again was the third in the series of the session, Fair Housing Summit, by our Montgomery County Human Rights Commission. Our chair, William England, is actually on the call today. So I want to thank him for being a part of this as well. And all of our commission members who were so helpful in putting this program forward. Commissioner Janice Freeman, also thank her for her participation. We also want to salute the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors. We want to salute the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, the Greater Maryland Association of Realtors, the Montgomery County Office of Human Rights, of course, and then also the Montgomery County Housing Opportunity Commission. All of you make up our team of folks, and also the NAACP, very much involved as well in this issue of fair housing as relates then to fair and accessible housing in our county. To all of you, thank you again for being a part of this. Stay tuned for our next series that we'll be looking at the issue of appraisal disparities, and also the issue of modification and disability, making real sure that our housing that we are building is indeed accessible to every person. And then also this issue of restricted covenants. Even though it's been passed and done away with a long time ago, it still remains an issue for some communities across our county, and maybe in your county or your city as well. Folks, again, thank you all for being here. My name is Jim Stoll. I'm Director of the Office of Human Rights. It's been our pleasure to have been with you this morning, and wish you all the best Have a great afternoon.